Okay, so wow, football's been rocked by Greg Clark's resignation with immediate effect from the FA. I was expecting to do some videos on the upcoming Eight Nations, the plans by the Premier League to discuss with the FA of bringing back allowing teams to have five substitutions while we're still going through this COVID pandemic. The upcoming State of Origin game two tomorrow in Sydney, where if New South Wales lose that game, they lose State of Origin. If they win that game, that means it will go to a decider in Brisbane. The fact that Vietnam has been dropped from the 2021 F1 calendar following an arrest of an official for bribery and corruption. But no, Greg Clark has decided to, well, he made some comments in front of a parliamentary select committee that he quickly apologised for. Let's be honest about that. I've read through the article that was on the news. In fact, there's several articles now up on multiple news websites, both independent and mainstream. And one thing that's interesting about his resignation statement, so what I say is interesting, is he'd been planning to resign and considering resignation for quite some time. Another thing to note is 3 years ago, this same select committee, the Digital Media, Culture and Sports Select Committee of the Houses of Parliament, following on from the Mark Sampson sacking as England women's manager in regards to allegations of racism and sexism that he had. Even though he got sacked for a different reason, but he was alleged to have been made some racist jokes and racist remarks aimed at some players, including Eni Aluko. He ended up getting sacked for a completely different reason. However, the FA was grilled over the coals, quite literally, dragged over the coals. And in the Select Committee's report, at that time, 3 years ago, it said the FA was not fit for purpose. It had showed signs of failure when it came to dealing with cases of bullying, racism, sexism, homophobia, and that it was not diverse enough, and it was seen as the old boys club. You could say that about a lot of sports, about sports governance needing reform, but the report said the FA needed to reform in a whole variety of areas. Greg Clark was chairman then. He was not chairman now. 3 years, almost to the day later, he resigns with immediate effect. If you read the full resignation statement, he does apologise. He had been considering resigning for some time, but when you refer to ethnic minorities as coloured, and when you refer to being openly gay as a life choice, kind of out of step with some portions of society. I mean, it's a divisive topic, but it shows how out of touch football and football governance is, and football in general, how out of touch is. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fan of basketball. It doesn't necessarily mean that isn't a sport that can be enjoyed by people. It's just that the sports news has gone about Greg Clark and his resignation. But it does show that the FA does have problems. When an MP on that select committee prompted him to retract the statement or rephrase the statement and apologise, it took a good couple of minutes before he actively apologised. And even then, his excuse was, "I trip over my words sometimes." Now, I don't think he was being homophobic or racist in any of his comments, because he was referring to the abuse that players of a variety of minorities, be it female, or openly gay fans and openly gay administrators, or players of ethnic minorities face online. That was the question he was asked about: why no players actively playing the game are actively openly gay. And the torrent of abuse that they face is a fear that is rightly there. Is he a man of a certain generation? Yes. Was the FA criticised for being a predominantly white, middle-aged and male organisation 3 years ago? Yes. Was it an organisation that was an old boys club, as it was referred to in that governmental report? Yes. So 3 years down the line, has anything really changed with the FA? Probably not. The reason why the select committee hearing was called was football needed to the issues with the COVID response, the issues with the bailout of lower league clubs and the financial assistance the Premier League could give, the pay-per-view shambles that has been October and beginning of November so far, and the fact that there are calls for it to go completely. Um, the response by the PFA over wage deferrals and wage cuts when clubs were furloughing non-playing staff, but wouldn't actually force wage cuts upon the players for fear of a strike. Yet these same clubs spent millions and millions and millions, if not over £1 billion in the transfer market, when a few months before they're saying we can't afford to pay our non-playing staff, shows that football really is out of touch. The term coloured, if you're from Southern Africa, it means mixed race. It's not a racist term socially in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, etc. If you're talking about people of colour, that is a legal term from North America, especially the US. But basically anywhere else in the Western world, if you refer to someone as coloured who is of an ethnic minority background, it is racist. It is considered racist now. When that term was first used, it was considered not racist. Society moves on. What is acceptable and not acceptable changes. 15 years ago, that may have been the case. Not now. The fact that the head of a governing body of a sport used that terminology, whether he could have resigned at a slightly later date, had put a provisional date of I'm standing down this date, and given the FA a bit more time, I think. No, be it black and Asian minority, BAME as the term had been invented because of the Rooney Rule in the US. That's where the term came from. But yeah, half Tunisian, she can refer to herself that because a lot of Africans who are white and African descent or Arab descent do refer to themselves as coloured. That is a different thing. But if a white person calls an Afro-Caribbean or an Asian coloured, then yeah, it is quite racist. It's the same if an Afro-Caribbean called me a honky tonk. It's classed as racist. Or there are a whole host of terms, and I encounter this every day at work. There's a lot of my work colleagues who do use quite racist language and are openly racist and don't care. And unfortunately, the industry I work in, it's a very working class industry. There's a lot of people of a certain age in that industry. Unfortunately, there's a lot of views held within the industry across the board. It doesn't matter what company I've worked for in the waste disposal industry, that is a thing. It needs to change, yes. But that's a societal thing. That's a video for the other channel, if I'm honest. But the fact that Greg Clark has resigned with immediate effect has thrown the FA into turmoil at a time when there are concerns with the governance of the game. Well, I have a knowledge of jive. Let's just say that. I actually speak a little bit of jive. I've got friends from North America. I've got friends from a variety of backgrounds. The interesting thing is, I have actually been called it as a racial slur by a black man. It's a two-way street. I unfortunately I do work with some very racist people, and no surprise, they voted Brexit. And yeah, this is translated into sport. The fact that the head of a governing body of a sport referred to members of that sport in such terms, whether he was meaning to be offensive or not, which I don't believe he is, but I think he's a man of a certain age, and this is where the FA was criticised. Oh, no, I'm not that sensitive. I've been called a white N-word before by a black friend. I'm a pretty pragmatic human being. I think we're all equal. The colour of one's skin or the prayer you say and whatever religious text you read or sexuality doesn't bother me. Just treat me as you want to be treated, which is a fist pump, how you do, and a good day. Simple. You treat me how you want to be treated. Simple. The thing is, on the aspect of the sporting side of things, this is the head of the governing body, and there's a code of conduct within the FA. The fact that the FA, however, was called not fit for purpose 3 years ago by the same select committee when it came to the fact that it was a majority white, middle-aged, male organisation in its structures. And there were concerns about bullying within the FA, about racism within the FA, about other abuses within the FA, about a misogynistic attitude within the FA. Even if, I think it's just not normalised. I mean, you can be racist about someone's nationality, whether they have a British passport, French passport, Italian, Spanish, Eastern European. It doesn't matter if you're white, black. Nationality can be a form of abuse that you receive, and there are issues between the various ethnic groups as well. I mean, ethnicity is well, a bit of a dated term, I would have thought, because there is only one race, and it's the human race. But we all have different pigmentations of skin. But the Asian community and the black community don't like each other very much either, as well. That's a known fact. That's a known thing. It's a known thing. Um, there's various gangs. I mean, the gang and sport is a way of equalising that. Unfortunately, when you do have um, the head of a governing body who is white, middle class, and male saying these things about females, people of the LGBTQ community plus, whatever you want to call it now. I just call it the LGBT community personally myself. That's how I was brought up. You know, the pride flag saying that's a life choice. Homosexuality is a life choice, and then referring. I mean, I think it shows how out of touch and how the FA does need to reform and have some fresh ideas and some fresh leadership, because it was referred to as the old boys club, and that does nothing to progress the sport and progress the organisation. This is coming at a time when football's in crisis anyway, where there is too much money in the sport. There's a lack of organisation and trust between various stakeholders within the game. What we've seen with the pay-per-view shambles, what we've seen with the battle between the EFL and the Premier League over funding and emergency payments and some financial support, because no fans in attendance, lower league clubs heavily reliant on gate receipts will go bust. Some of them have said they'll go bust by Christmas. We could see double figures go out of business before Christmas, as high as 30 or 40 by Easter. And if we're going by what the Huddersfield owner said at the beginning of the pandemic, 60 clubs could be gone by the end of the season. That is no joke. That is a real thing. There is a funding problem within football. There's a structural problem within football. And there seems to be no solution to it because there can't be any agreement to it. And what Man United and Liverpool did with their plans to restructure the Premier League to suit their own ends and protect themselves, make themselves as much money as possible, while actually affecting the rest of the league structure, didn't go down well. Then you've got League One and League Two discussing about the possibility of having a salary cap, but the EFL hasn't put that to a full EFL vote yet. The League One and League Two clubs at the time, those clubs that were still in League One and League Two, obviously we've had promotion and relegation since then, basically said we need a salary cap in order to control costs. Financial fair play doesn't work. Serafin, the guy in charge of UEFA, has said, yeah, it doesn't work, but we haven't got a solution or an idea in place or some plans in place to replace financial fair play. And the European Super League argument that keeps popping up every couple of seasons, seems to be in the background, always seems to get leaked, as if the clubs know that their idea is going to anger fans. I mean, look what happened with the La Liga last season or the season before, wanted to play a game in America between Barcelona and another club. And the players said, no, we're not doing that. And the fans came out in mass protests. And then the Spanish FA said, we are not sanctioning this. We are not accepting this. We're not happy with this. This is not happening. It's not a thing. And it was the league organisation and the clubs that made up La Liga trying to circumvent and go against the wishes of everyone else. And the Premier League is doing the same. The issues on a whole is 3 years ago we were told that the FA needs to change. The fact that another member of the FA currently is now the interim McCormick, Peter McCormick as the interim, shows that, well, we've got this guy has resigned, and his replacement, short term at least, is still part of the same old boys club. They need to get some outside ideas in and someone from outside football to try and govern football, because football cannot govern itself. Plain and clear. And this debate is being had constantly about sports governance, and football governance has shown itself yet again to shoot itself in the foot. The sport has a habit of shooting itself in the foot, and reform cannot happen with football from within football. It has to happen with some outside pressure coming in, because it's not doing it from within, clearly. Because in 3 years since that last select committee report, after the Mark Sampson scandal, nothing's changed. Because the wording, if he'd said, if he had said, uh, just kept it at BAME and female players and the abuse they face, and why there's no LGBTQ players, openly gay players in the men's game, for example, playing that are openly gay, it'd have been fine. But when he referred to being gay as a life choice, that is the second comment within the same statement that he was giving in the same answer to the question, which just shows a little bit of out of touch. Now, is he a homophobe? No. Is he a racist? No. Is he an idiot? Yes. Because clearly he's misread the room and he clearly doesn't pay attention to what's going on in the wider society at the moment with the divisions that we have. Sport should be a unifier, not a divider, and this is going to divide opinion. Posted a video about it, it's going to get divided opinion, but it has stated, and we're talking about like how VAR last night with the offside goal because his finger was in front of the line because he was pointing where he wanted the ball to go. This is a sport that can't even get the offside rule right. Its own rules it can't even get right. Its own refereeing is a mess. This is a sport that is so behind the curveball, so behind other sports in adopting technology to assist officials that when they do adopt it, they make shambles out of it. And this is a sport where most of the games of club football, excluding the FA Cup, are on subscription TV. Yet you're paying a subscription, then you've got to pay a pay-per-view even more because the TV companies and the Premier League clubs want to make as much money as possible and recoup some of the losses that they've had since March. Money is driving the game. We've seen politics infuse itself into football since March with mixed results. A lot of people aren't very happy with the way that sport and politics is becoming intertwined, especially football. It's not going down well. It's dividing opinion. It's creating more divisiveness when sport should be a unifier. I mean, I don't want to go on about just Greg Clark. I think his resignation, well, if you read the full statement of his resignation statement, if you read the full articles that are all online, because the articles do cherry pick certain things, and I think there is a certain bias in a large portion of the mainstream media. But it came up on my newsfeed. But now multiple left and right wing publications, if you can call it that, in the mainstream media, so like the left leaning media and the right leaning media, are cherry picking what they want to sell their story to their readers, right? But his full resignation statement does state that he had been considering his resignation and his position for some time, which says there's more to than just going, I'm resigning because I've said a few silly words. There's more going on behind the scenes at the FA, which may come out. You don't consider your position for a lengthy period of time if there's not other issues weighing upon the individual or within that organisation. That clearly says to me that there are further problems within the FA than just the FA chairman being a bit of a dimwit and not really considering what he's saying. The fact he had to be prompted to apologise for saying basically a racial slur tells you what you need to know about the character of the man and how out of touch he is. Now we've still got to wait and see what comes of this select committee hearing with the FA, the EFL, and the Premier League about the crisis that's engulfed football, mostly financially. I was going to do a video about the Premier League considering 5 substitutions again, as they did when the play restarted at the end of last season, about when they allowed 5 subs. Because high-profile managers and high-profile clubs are pushing for it, be it Liverpool, Man City in this case with Klopp and Guardiola. The interesting thing is, in the aftermath of that game, I looked at the substitutions. Only 3 subs were used throughout the entire game. 1 by Man City, 2 by Liverpool. 1 was an injury substitution. Yet these are 2 clubs calling for having 5 substitutions allowed. Yet they only use 3 out of the allocated 6 available. That's a bit of a head scratcher to me. If you're saying you need 5 substitutions, why only use 1 of one squad and 2 of another? And they're complaining about fixture congestion. They always complain about fixture congestion. Yeah, they want to. Every player wants to play every game, and the more games you play, the more revenue you make. Football amazes me when they're complaining about player workload when some of these players are earning big money and not doing a hell of a lot. Look at Gareth Bale. The last 18 months at Real Madrid, he basically spent his entire time playing golf. But it is interesting that 2 big, powerful clubs within the game are saying we want 5 substitutions back, and now the FA and the Premier League are considering it. But when Aston Villa and Dean Smith was interviewed after their game, he said, "I'm not in favour of 5 substitutions. I mean, we're playing a full season. We're professional athletes. We've been making do with 3 substitutions for 20, 30 odd years." So there is a divisiveness within the Premier League about the 5. Should they bring back 5 subs? I was going to do a video on that. Should they consider it? It's an idea that should be put forward on the table. But now the FA doesn't have a chairman, and there is a power vacuum, and there is a clear issue within the game about how out of touch it really is with mainstream society. I mean, the pay-per-view fiasco just shows how out of touch and how they misread the room, so to speak, with the whole situation about what's going on financially and economically in the country. That pay-per-view thing, the pay-per-view Premier League pay-per-view has been nothing short of a fiasco and a PR disaster for football. Greg Clark's resignation is another PR disaster for football. This is a sport that regularly likes to shoot itself in the foot. It's not the only sport having some negative headlines today. I will admit that. It's not the only sport. I mean, F1 is also in the headlines for the wrong reasons because the Vietnam Grand Prix has been dropped from the calendar next year because one of the chief officials in Vietnam organising the Grand Prix has been charged with corruption. So F1 is another sport that has too much money floating around it and some very shady goings on and really poor, and there's issues with Sao Paulo and Rio. Will Interlagos be the home of the Brazilian Grand Prix long term, or are they going to actually eventually get this racetrack built at Rio because Liberty Media doesn't like the promoter of the Interlagos circuit because he's a Bernie Ecclestone he's a friend of Bernie Ecclestone. It does concern me that some of these really high-profile sports and wealthy sports are creating a lot of negative headlines. And now the Vietnam one, while the corruption charges are not actually linked to the Grand Prix organisation, it is a concern. Liberty Media were very keen to grow in the South East Asian market, and this is one of their first decisions they made when they took over the running of F1 was we're going to have a Grand Prix in Vietnam. And now, will that Grand Prix ever take place? And the fact that there's corruption allegations lingering around that is not a good look. It's another PR nightmare for another sport that's had a lot of negative headlines in the last couple of years. And the mainstream media does have a part to play, and I think the media and social media has had a part to play in Greg Clark's resignation as well. There's no denying that his resignation. Yeah, the media and social media have had a part to play. People are watching live because this is, it is on live TV as well. These parliamentary select committees are on BBC Parliament. You can watch them at any time. And the backlash is as soon as, he's giving his evidence, journalists are on Twitter giving him a right hard time, and then it spreads and it goes viral. And he apologised at the time, but he was prompted to apologise. The FA then releases their own Twitter saying, it's unacceptable. He has apologised. Within a few hours, he's out of a job. So when I get in from work at 3 o'clock, he's apologised for he's in hot water over some remarks he makes. Within 4 hours, or 3.5 hours, he's resigned. There's social media as well. Yeah, he's costing himself his job as well. But at the same time, I think social media has sped up his resignation. He was planning to resign anyway, but that's a mess with football. I mean, there's other things we could be talking about. Vince McMahon to run for president in 2024. Don't even get me started on politics. I mean, a couple of years ago, I seem to remember someone asking my views on Donald Trump, and I think the live stream is still up in the live stream playlist. It's still there. It's funny. It's funny, the response that I give, because it goes on for about an hour and a half of me going off on one. I had a proper rant about it. And then the next night, someone else asked a similar question. And ironically, the guy who had asked my views on Trump basically said, don't go there. If you want to find out his views, watch last night's live stream in full from this period to this period. Gave some time counts. The vote recounting happens a lot. It's the same when it came to awarding the Olympics to London 2012 and 2005. There was some question marks about the voting. There's been question marks about the IOC's procedures and votes at the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee. Vote recounts do happen if it's a very, very close, tight-knit contest. It's happened in sports voting when it comes to voting on a variety of things, and it has happened. It obviously happens in politics. When you come to a vote or a decision recounts are more common than you think. And the Al Gore, that was Florida. I mean, no, unless Trump can get the Pennsylvania result overturned, he's not winning the presidency. It doesn't matter about Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, and New Mexico, and some of these other states. If he can't get Pennsylvania overturned, he hasn't got a hope. And all the other states declared very early. I'm not an expert in American politics, but I do know how voting counting goes. And from what I can gather, he needs to win Pennsylvania. He hasn't done that. Pennsylvania did declare after a very close vote, and it did come down to a few thousand votes. So it doesn't matter what Trump does. But I do remember Al Gore in 2000, long time ago. And I remember the Florida recount. But yeah, this was a very tightly fought election, and that's another thing. It's the same with looking at trying to secure votes. Right, you've got to appeal to your voter base, and then you've got to appeal to those swing voters. So we saw this with Augustine Pichot and Bill Beaumont when it came to World Rugby and their election, and that came down to some swing votes that promised support to Pichot and then went the other way. We've seen it with the IOC, we've seen it with FIFA, we've seen it with a whole host of sporting governing bodies when they have to vote on a decision, be it a rule change, a governance change, a policy, awarding a tournament. There's been some question marks over the IOC and how they award Olympic Games, going back to Salt Lake City. Look, my granddad used to be an MP in the West Midlands back in the 70s, and when he lost his seat in 1979, there was 5 recounts. They recounted one constituency 5 times, and it was one of the last seats to declare in the 1979 election. That I do know. And yeah, it happens a lot, but it's not a sports question, is it? But I understand where you're coming from with that regard. In regards to some of the other sports rules I want to talk about, obviously VAR has made another shambles with another weird decision. We're talking about VAR again. Rugby Union and the 8 Nations, all but 2 of the games, because of TV rights, are on Amazon. I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, it is every week with VAR now, but this is the situation we have. The FA chairman has resigned the night before VAR makes a howler. Earlier on yesterday, there was plans put forward that the Premier League and the FA would be discussing possibly allowing 5 substitutions. There's things on the FA's agenda. Okay, the COVID response and Premier League and EFL at loggerheads over financial payments and support packages for lower league clubs. The VAR debate, well, it's a daily thing now, isn't it? It's not just a weekly thing, it's a daily thing. Every game that has a VAR in it. The international break, there's question marks whether we should still continue with the Nations League, considering, what's going on with this virus and this pandemic and international travel, and the fact that the last England squad had players breaching the COVID protocols. And then you've got now the FA without a full-time chairman. You have an interim chairman. All within the space of, 4 hours. We've gone from FA chairman Greg Clark apologises to I'm resigning with immediate effect. There's obviously other things going on behind the scenes at the FA that we're not privy to, because if you read his statement, his resignation statement, he had been pondering and considering his position and whether to resign earlier for some time. So clearly there's an issue. Now has he pushed before? Did he walk before he was pushed, or was this the straw that snapped the camel's back? Now it's a divisive topic, I know. Crikey, there was someone who watched the video, didn't complete watching it, and just gave it a dislike because for whatever reason. I don't get that. You just watch the video in full. Watch my view in full. I think it shows how out of touch the FA is. And if you go back 3 years, there was the same select committee said the FA, as it currently stands with its structures and its governance, is not fit for purpose. It described the FA, and I'll repeat this again, as an old boys club, mostly white, middle-aged men running the game. So, well, I'm not a big fan of forced diversity, and I've said that many times. Diversity growth starts at the bottom. It does, and finding out why certain social groups aren't interested in certain sports and asking their opinions why Why don't you want to be involved? Why you don't want to participate in this particular sport? Why you're not a fan of this particular sport? And you figure out solutions to solve the problem. It then filters its way up. That's the grassroots is the best way to solve the diversity crisis. You've got to find out why certain ethnic minorities and certain social backgrounds are not interested in football, or why they're underrepresented in football, be it in governance at the local county FA level, playing at amateur level, the Sunday leagues, the non-league fan base. You need to understand why. But yeah, Greg Clark's resignation, it should come as no surprise if he's been considering it for some time. But there's obviously got to be other issues behind the scenes at the FA, which we'll find out in due course about why he's been pondering his position for some time. That is his words. That is in his resignation statement. Now, if you look at the questioning, the Parliamentary Select Committee asked him about why there are no openly gay players. Now, he refers to social media being a free-for-all, and he refers to the abuse that female players receive, referees receive. But then this is where he sticks his foot in it. He refers to black and Asian players as coloured, and he refers to being gay as a life choice. So your sexuality is a life choice. Now, he was prompted to apologise later on in his statement. An MP on the Select Committee interrupted him and said, "Do you want to retract that statement and reword it? Do you want to apologise?" And then he apologised. Now, I think the situation with football. Look, I've got friends who are gay. Well, doesn't bother me. I treat people the same way they would treat me, with respect. I don't care if you're black, white, pink, an alien. I do care if you're a Trump voter or a Conservative voter. That's another, or vote for Brexit. That's another thing. I take that with a pinch of salt. But for the most part, it doesn't bother me. The science side of it, and the fact that there's plenty of crap online about is it nature nurture. We can debate that on the other channel. But I have no idea what terraforming is. I'm assuming it's something quite unpleasant. Maybe quite pleasant. I don't know. That doesn't mean. I'm actually going to check what terraforming is. I'm going to have a look at that whilst I light a fag, because smoking is bad and I don't care, because I read the warning labels on things and I go, it's a conscious decision. Let's have a look what we've got. Bloody neighbour upstairs make a bloody racket. Bang, bang. What's that fireworks? If that's fireworks, I'd be bloody annoyed. Terraforming. Terraforming is earth shaping or planet deliberately modifying its atmosphere. Terraforming Mars. Oh yeah, they want. There's plans to make Mars habitable by humans. The thing is, its atmospheric makeup is wrong. You would have to completely change its gravitational field because its gravity is weaker. It's a science thing. That bores me. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Technically, the International Space Station is a terraform because you've made it so that humans can habitate it. The fact it's in zero gravity is kind of fun. I think it takes 6 months. They plan to have a rocket get there in 6 months. I know that probes, satellites take about 6 to 9 months, depending on the rocket that they use, the payload that they use, and how heavy the rocket is, and the angle of the Earth they leave. That's a long time. And the return journey, I don't think you can have a vehicle to do a return journey. We have already, yes, we have got satellites orbiting Mars. We've got probes on Mars, researching the planet. And that's science. That's great. That's for the other channel. This is the sports channel. I would love to talk about exploration of space, and that does really interest me a lot. I'm more interested right now in what's going on in sport. And what we see today is, I'm going to actually check other sports headlines. So let's see what else is breaking news in sport, because the Greg Clark thing is not the only thing I want to talk about. I do think it was an avoidable situation. Absolutely. I think there's no doubt about, he's really put his foot in it and done more PR damage for the FA because I look at the comments on social media, and the keyboard warriors are out in force tonight. So the main headline is that he's resigned as FA chairman. The Delhi Daredevils have lost the IPL final to Mumbai. DeChambeau is toying with a 48-inch driver in a bid to hit the ball further at Augusta, at the Augusta Masters. Bellingham has been called up for England. The Vietnam Grand Prix has been dropped because of the arrest of an official. The Jets quarterback Flacco makes NFL history in Patriots loss. New York Jets quarterback Joe Flacco passes Hall of Famer Joe Montana to move 20th all time for passing yards in the NFL. Okay, that's interesting. So Joe Flacco is now 20th all time in passing yards. That is a very interesting stat if you're a stats nerd. Obviously, we've had the FA Cup first round, which some people thought wouldn't take place because of the pandemic. That's taken place with no crowds, so the FA Cup is still obviously meant to be the biggest moneymaker for the FA after the internationals not making a lot of money because of the lack of fans. The remaining women's Six Nations games have all been called off, so the women's Six Nations will not complete. Wow, 10 Football League clubs are struggling to pay wages this month. So let's have a little read of this article. Joe Bellingham not playing in England, like Sancho, Jadon Sancho both playing for Dortmund. A lot of English players, especially at youth level, are now starting to look abroad to get their opportunities, and that is an indictment of the game as well. Right. 10 English Football League clubs are struggling to pay wages this month. This is what this parliamentary committee was all about. That has cost Greg Clark his job. Premier League's proposed £50 million rescue package for League One and League Two was described as pitiful by committee chairman Julian Knight. EFL chairman Rick Parry, I do hope he gets sacked, hopes a deal with the Premier League can be agreed by the end of the month. That may be too late. There are 10 clubs currently who can't pay their players and their non-playing staff this month. He was speaking at the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee, where it was also confirmed the Premier League was preparing to abandon the trial of some pay-per-view matches costing fans $14.95. It's Premier League's basically going to get rid of the pay-per-view. It looks like we've listened to feedback, and whilst we are not able to announce anything today, we'll be changing direction and moving away from it and taking another step probably to see us through lockdown, the Christmas period into January. So Richard Masters has basically said we're going to get rid of it, but they haven't got a solution for what to replace it with. Now, the £50 million bailout for League One and League Two was rejected by the EFL in October, so last month. We would very much like to do a deal with the Premier League, and we're having constructive dialogue. But Rick Parry is not the guy you want running the game. It was our League One and League Two clubs last month who, in a gesture of solidarity, said they did not want to abandon the Championship. They wanted to deal with the league as a whole, not just bits and pieces. The Premier League has now said it is prepared to consider the Championship, so we can move forward on that basis. The Premier League didn't want to give the Championship any more money to support the clubs that can't afford to pay players. The government has made it clear it will not provide a bailout to elite football, but Masters said the Premier League's offer was appropriate and goes to the heart of the problem. No, it doesn't. Yeah, the Premier League is engaged and wants to seek resolution, but there can't be a blank check or an underwriting of losses. The fact is, part of the problem is the TV deal. So 10 Football League clubs cannot pay their players, which is a very interesting in the sense that the PFA said to their members, the players, don't take pay cuts or wage deferrals. 6 months down the line, clubs can't pay their players. And the PFA are still basically entrenched in their position, telling players not to take wage cuts or wage deferrals. So nothing's changed. That is a concern for me, that if you look at the picture as a whole, the fact that the PFA weren't willing to negotiate with the clubs about wage cuts and wage deferrals in good faith. They weren't. It has partly led to this position. Fans not being in attendance for lower league clubs is a problem because they're reliant on that income to sustain themselves. Well, here's the thing about the Greg Clark situation, and the Southgate situation is there as well. A lot of fans aren't happy with Southgate and some of his decisions. It doesn't specify in that article because, having not seen the full select committee hearing, I can't comment. The fact that Rick Parry, who is a bugbear for many fans anyway, in his running of the EFL, has stated on the record that 10 clubs that they are aware of. Now, whether they're willing to disclose what clubs, that's up to the club owners and club boards to then go before the select committee and say that we are struggling. This is the situation we find ourselves in. The fact that the government is not willing to bail out football is interesting, considering that they have given loans to, other sports is interesting as well. Rugby league, for example. Rugby league, the RFL got a small bailout earlier in the summer to see the game through, to see the sport through at community level. The really interesting thing, and I will say this, is that the fact that we have 10 clubs unable to pay their bills, pay their staff, pay their players is concerning. So the warning from the Huddersfield owner during the height of the first lockdown that 50 to 60 clubs could go bust is starting to ring true. It is. There is a problem. The fact that the League One and League Two clubs said the EFL as a whole should get assistance, not just them, and the Championship should be considered, is important. The fact that the Premier League didn't consider that when they were off, discussing this, again shows bad faith negotiation. Again, on the FA point, I don't think it's Gareth Southgate getting the job, but 3 years ago when Mark Sampson was sacked, then we had the Sam Allardyce saga where he was caught out basically admitting, how to get around transfer rules and basically admitting that there are ways to be a crook in football and get away with it. The FA, again, had to go before the select committee, and the select committee published a report. And the report stated that the FA, again, was full of old men, middle class and white, and was not representative of society and had poor structures in place, and it was referred to as an old boys club. I think other issues are in place. He did mention in his resignation statement that he'd been considering resigning for some time. So there's clearly other things going on at the FA that behind the scenes that we are, not party to. And I believe in the fullness of time, things will come out about the situation within the FA. There's clearly problems there. The handling of the COVID pandemic hasn't been great by the governing body of the FA, hasn't been great by the Premier League, hasn't been great by the EFL. So there's been a lot of pressure on football in general from the public, from the media, for a good 8 months. But what we are now seeing now is the jobs for mates is what was put in that report 3 years ago. 3 years ago, this same Digital Media, Culture and Sports Select Committee in their report said it was an old boys club. Very similar to the ECB, very similar to the RFL, very similar to the RFU. The four main sports in this country, cricket, rugby league, rugby union, football, have been described in this parliamentary select committee as an old boys club, not representative of the sports they govern, not representative of society, and not fit for purpose. This has been said 3 years down the line from that report. The FA chairman has resigned. and the FA are now in a position where they've got to look for a new chairman, and it is what it is. When it says who's the best football team right now, there's a reason why France won the World Cup and why we didn't. They may not be the best team on paper, but they managed to win. And Didier Deschamps is facing the same criticism in France as Gareth Southgate is facing in England with some of his squad selections, some of his tactics. You know, you know, um, some of the players that he's kept in the team who aren't performing at club level. Still managed to win a World Cup. Still managed to get to a Euro final as well. So he got to 2 finals in 2 years and wins one of them. So you look at the French team on paper, and yeah, there are some pretty average selections. On the side of what players we have available, the fact that Southgate, and I'm critical of some of Southgate's choices. I mean, some of the games I've watched where England have played, I'm scratching my head as to the tactical setup, players selected to start. The fact that Jamie Vardy announced his international retirement because he felt that Southgate was going away from direction, which suited him. He felt sidelined. And to be fair, he's the second, he's one of the top scorers in the Premier League. The fact Vardy is not part of the England setup is a head scratcher. That's a player who's actually got a Premier League winners medal. Who's played through all the leagues, not just in the Premier League. He's played in the non-league and the lower leagues. It is a head scratcher for me. Ben Foster. I mean, yeah, okay, maybe not the best goalkeeper out there, but again, retired from international football, citing, the setup. There are players who aren't happy with the direction the team is taking. And it's like Gary Cahill announcing his international retirement the same day as Jamie Vardy. I mean, there's not enough experienced players in that squad, in my view. And that, I think, is what's going to, I think, one of the reasons why I think we lost that semi-final against Croatia, lack of experience. And I think it's going to come back to haunt us in the Euros next year. I think that lack of experience and lack of leadership within the squad is going to be a problem. And the goalkeeping situation, I think that's another head scratcher. I don't think we've got a very dominant goalkeeper, and that's no slight on any of them because obviously they are top flight goalkeepers. But I think they're all young. Pickford's a good shot stopper. There's no doubt on that. But some of his positional play in the box and some of his mistakes come at big times, big moments. He's very error prone, and he's not the most dominant when it comes to dominating his box and going for crosses, be it punch it clear or catch it. It doesn't help that the defence in front of him, some of the players, I think, aren't actually that great. Personally, I think, Southgate. I think the shine has come off. I am scratching my head at some of the selections in recent international camps, and some of the performances haven't been good. I think there's too many defenders and not enough attacking players. And England, with the way they set up and the way that these young players play the ball, is a 4-3-3 counter attack. We play best when we play at pace. Our possession game doesn't suit the players available. Yet he's going for a very defensive mindset with his selections. It is for me a bit of a head scratcher. I'm not a fan of Southgate. He didn't do great at Middlesbrough as a manager. Did we fluke our way to the World Cup semi-final? Did we actually get there by merit? We were lucky in the draw we had, I think, too reliant on set plays and not enough open play. Only one goal scored from outside the box, apart from I think Trippier's free kick. So that tells you something. Too reliant on a handful of players, to get you over the line. Do I think a coach can be good in one sport in more than one sport? If you look at the Olympics, yes, several coaches in the Olympics have coached multiple athletes in multiple fields. I think the coach that you're going to look at is Eddie Jones, and Shaun Edwards, two rugby union coaches who've also been flirting. Well, Shaun Edwards obviously played rugby league as well. On that respect, I think Eddie Jones is flirting with rugby league in Australia. There's been a lot of media speculation about him coming over to rugby league after his England contract expires, be it at club level or international origin level. And Shaun Edwards has also been linked with the return to rugby league as well. I think Eddie Jones and Shaun Edwards are the two that I think could cross over codes. But it's an interesting one. I've never seen a football. I mean, Sir Clive Woodward did do some work with Southampton. I think Ralph Kruger, the former Buffalo Sabres coach, did some work with Southampton as well as a performance director. So there is a bit of crossover, but at the same time, each, apart from rugby league and rugby union, which are pretty similar sports in a sense, the same basic skill set is required to play both games. Other sports are so unique that it's very, very, very interesting. You could have some kind of NFL coach, like a fitness coach, possibly come over and work on player fitness and that kind of aspect of it. But I couldn't see an NFL coach, completely change sport and go into football. You start playing these sports at a very young age and you work your way through. I couldn't see an NFL coach doing that. It's an interesting question. Could a coach in one sport swap over? But when you talk about professional team sports, that is a very difficult thing to do. Very, very difficult thing to do. If you talk about a head coach, if you're talking about like a fitness coach or something along those lines, then it's a possibility. If you've got a fitness coach, you're just working on player fitness and core strength, and player rehabilitation from injury and that kind of respect, then yes, absolutely a fitness coach or a high performance director. That is quite doable. Talking about a head coach, like, absolutely not. A head coach, I think, there's this because you start playing these sports at youth at a very, very early age. You learn your basic skills young. Some of these coaches are ex-players. They would have to completely change their mindset and how they would go about, coaching. They would have to completely learn a new sport, a new style of play, new tactics. I think rugby union and rugby league is, I think, the only two sports, their codes are the same sport, really, rugby, that you could have a coaching crossover. And it does happen that, with the fitness coaches, skills coaches, defence coaches, attack coaches, there's a fair bit of crossover there. And Eddie Jones is linked with a move to rugby league. There is growing speculation about Eddie Jones's long-term coaching future and his direction that he's going to take. There is a long-term goal there, I believe, and the media speculations there. But on the Declan Rice thing, yeah, the way obviously he played, obviously youth level for one country and then swapped allegiance for another, hasn't gone down well. But there's this, youth selection and senior selection. I think we've seen it in rugby union, international selection policy. We've seen it in rugby league. We're now seeing it in football. The rules need to be looked at about eligibility rules. We've seen, look at the French rugby union national side. Look how many overseas players have got into the French national side rugby union because of residency. They need to look at the selection rules and consider reforming them, because there's been a lot of criticism in rugby union, rugby league about their selection rules. Cricket the same. There's been a lot of players who played for England and Ireland who are not Irish or English in international cricket. Again, selection rules need to be looked at there. I think on the Declan Rice side of things, that created a lot of debate in both Ireland and England about his switch of allegiance, and not everyone is a fan of Declan Rice, unless you're a West Ham fan. But on the side of it, of the fact that as a youth player, played for England, swapped allegiance for Ireland, or vice versa. I can't remember if it was Ireland or England he swapped allegiance for. He was an Irish youth player, swapped allegiance for England, and that's divided opinion. There's a lot of divided opinion over in Ireland. But then you look at players like Jason McAteer, for example, born and bred Scouser, parents are Irish, chose to play for Ireland. He was interviewed about the whole Declan Rice situation off the ball, which is an Irish media podcast, which is on YouTube as well. And listen to some of the McAteer's response, and then. But then the selection rules need to be looked at. You could argue the same about Diego Costa. He represented Brazil 3 times, but they were in non-FIFA friendlies, and then he goes over to play for Spain, and he's a divisive character. And you have to look at international selection rules and how players are selected for various countries. The Declan Rice situation does sum things up though, where we've seen it before, and the Irish FA has got their own problems. The Mick McCarthy situation, paying him out, and issues with money. But the Declan Rice situation is very, very interesting, if I'm brutally honest. But it has divided opinion. It does raise the question about international eligibility. And it's not just football, cricket, rugby union, rugby league. They've all had these issues. Ice hockey's had it about international eligibility. Again, in order for a player to be eligible, there are 2 ways, or 3 ways to be eligible. Residency. If you've been in a country long enough and get residency, and then you can get a passport. A parent or grandparent, or you are, born in that country. See, 3 ways to get your international eligibility rules. Maybe 3 ways. The fact that Germany are trying to get him, I don't know how long he's spent in Germany. I know he's playing with the England under-21s, but it depends how much time he's spent in Germany. Because if he's been there, at Dortmund for a period of time, and he's lived in Germany for a period of time, he can claim under residency. You look at some of the German players. You got when they won the World Cup, Khedira, Tunisian, Özil, Turkish. Oliver Neuville used to play for Germany. Swiss, Podolski and Klose were technically Polish. If you want to go by international eligibility rules, one or both their parents were Polish. Owen Morgan is another one. England one-day captain. Again, divides opinion. Could Ireland have benefited from him being Test captain? Quite possibly. You have to look at the amount of time a player has lived in a country, whether he's got a parent or grandparent, and was he born there. It's difficult, but well, he's got a German mother, so automatically he's eligible for Germany. He's got a Nigerian father, he's automatically eligible for Nigeria. He's lived here or moved here at the age of 7. So he could say he's eligible under residency and being developed at youth level. They need to look at the eligibility requirements. And the same is said about rugby union. The fact he's played at youth level at under 16s for Germany, he's played other youth groups for England. It's a debating point. The German FA are trying to put pressure on the player to switch allegiance. Now, what are the English FA doing in trying to entice him to stay? That's the important thing. And now, what happened with Greg Clark today and the turmoil the FA is in right now, I can sway his decision. But you look at the German setup and look at the amount of foreign players within their team. It's crucial. Or within their setup in recent years. And I mentioned Klose, I mentioned Podolski, Ozil, Sami Khedira, Oliver Neuville, for example. Players who played for Germany in the last 2 decades. There's a lot of them who aren't actually German. But they qualify for either residency, a parent being German, or they were born there. You look at the US men's national side, a lot of them born in Germany. The US men's team, a good 7-8 players were born in Germany, partly because their parents were on NATO bases during the Cold War. It's an interesting one. The Declan Rice situation, again, is a similar one where a player's played for one country at youth level and then switches allegiance when he's called up at senior level because another FA has got in his ear and said, look, we can guarantee you international appearances. So there is that debate. There is that, the debate about, eligibility rules. Do I think Ireland would have been given cricket test status if Owen Morgan had played for them and stayed? Yes, I do. I think they would have developed, if that kind of star player, the ICC, I think, would have allowed them to have test status much earlier because it's sellable. It's a product they can sell. I don't know. On the, the Salia is his name, Jamal, whatever his name is. The fact he is playing in Germany in the top flight in the Bundesliga, and he's playing good minutes. The German FA are going to try and nab him. It's what the English FA can do to get to a Sancho and say, look, stay with us. But the Declan Rice situation has shown that, it's divisive. I think that was their plan. I don't know what attacks they've been trying to pull, but he's even right now. Again, because he's played for both countries at junior age groups, and this is the thing. He's played at youth level for both countries, and this is where international eligibility, I think, needs to be looked at. And when you start playing at youth level for one country, I think that should be the country you stay with. Diego Costa is another example of a player who switched allegiance, playing 3. I think there's a minimum threshold of how many internationals you can play for one country before you swap for another. And I think the Diego Costa is the player they use as an example about, okay, you've now played so many tests for this country. It's an interesting one. Rugby Union and Rugby League have the same debate. I mean, Semi Radradra has played Rugby League for Australia, plays internationally for Fiji and Rugby Union. The Fafita brothers have played both for Australia and Tonga when it comes to Rugby League. Sonny Bill Williams is chosen to play for Samoa at the Rugby League World Cup next year, alongside his cousin in Rugby Union, plays Samoa, but he's played for the All Blacks at test level for Rugby League at the All Blacks. So Sonny Bill Williams, All Black representative, New Zealand cap player, Rugby Union, Rugby League. He's played for New Zealand, and now he's chosen to play for Samoa next year's World Cup. You look at the Australian side, I mean, crikey, how many Fijians do they have in both their union and league sides? This is a debating point that's being had right now in Australia about the makeup of their team and the amount of Pacific Islanders who could be playing for Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, the Cook Islands, so New Zealand. But, Brad Takarangi of Parramatta Eels, I mean, he's played for New Zealand and the Cook Islands. His sister plays for the Cook Islands and has also played for New Zealand at test level. So, again, Rugby Union and Rugby League selection rules are a bit of just play for who you feel like, really. If you look at the makeup of the All Blacks, a good, I think half their starting 15 could play for one of the Pacific Island nations. So that there is clearly um, loopholes in the selection process and the eligibility process at international sport. Owen Morgan in cricket, Kevin Peterson, South African, ended up playing for us. The South Africans didn't want him for a variety of reasons. Whether they're right or wrong to not have him is another thing. But eligibility rules, the US, when it comes to their national football side, a lot of German-born players who are eligible to play for Germany. Australian football side, a lot of Croatian and Italian eligible players playing for Australia. Rugby union and rugby league in the US, a lot of South Sea Islanders, a lot of Pacific Islanders playing in the US rugby systems. So, I mean, crikey, you could pretty much name a full Samoan team that has appeared for the All Blacks in the last 5 years. You could name a full Fijian team that's played for Australia in the last 5 years in either code. That is the problem with the international selection eligibility rules. Rugby league, you can just choose your eligibility on each season, it seems. We've had a player who's played for Portugal, Blake Austin, play for Great Britain. We've had McQueen, ex-Gold Coast Titans player, ex-West Tigers player, Australian, has played State of Origin, play for England at the 2017 World Cup. So I am scratching my head with some of the tenuous. I mean, Tyson Frizell of the St George, well, now of the Newcastle Knights, formerly of the Dragons of St George, played State of Origin for the New South Wales Blues, played for Wales at international level. So I really am scratching my head when I'm thinking, you don't sound very Welsh. You've got a very thick New South Wales accent there. But again, parent heritage. So they have to look at the selection rules of variety. I mean, look at ice hockey. Look at the GB men's national top flight side. Perlini, his brother plays in the NHL. Both Perlini brothers were born in Guildford. One decides to opt for Canada. The other decides to opt for GB. And you look at the selection rules and you listen to some of the accents of the GB players. There's quite a few Canadians in there. And this is the problem, parent heritage. You can just go, I've never lived in the UK, or I've lived in the UK, but my passport says Canada, residency. So yeah, selection rules, they need to be looked at. I think a fair few of the international players have lived in said country, but the fact that they weren't developed by that country at youth level, or they've only got there by residency within the last 5 or 7 years, I forget how long the residency rule has to be, is really interesting. And outside of the men's ice hockey team and the men's football team in the US, rugby league, rugby union, yeah, lots of overseas players in the US set up, and the same in Canada as well. There's a fair few in Canada. Again, so it is troubling for me. As long as they are eligible by a predefined qualification, what would be wrong with players changing allegiances? Well, if you stated in your career that you want to play for this country, let's say in this example, England or rugby union, or Wales rugby union. So Vunipolas and Taulupe Faletau, they're cousins, they're Tongan. And then suddenly later down in your career, I actually want to switch allegiance now. I've played 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 games for one country. Do you mind if I play a couple of games for these? It does make a mockery of the selection rules where you can just go, I can play for one country for a period of time, fall out of favour, maybe not necessarily agree with the direction of the team. I want to play for this team. International sport is not the same as club sport. In club sport, you can go, I'm not happy with the direction of the team. I want to transfer. I want to trade. I want to leave this organisation. I see myself having more of a chance of fulfilling my objectives in that team. That's club football. That's club rugby league. It's club rugby union. That's NHL ice hockey. I put in a trade request. I want to be moved. NFL. I'm not happy with this organisation. I'm not happy with how things go. I put in a trade request. That's fine. Internationally, there's a reason why it's called international. by pure definition, you have been selected to play for the country of your choice or the country that has chosen. Rugby union, rugby league is having the debate about eligibility rules. The Declan Rice and Diego Costa situations have again raised the question about eligibility rules. Diego Costa had lived in Spain for quite some time playing for Atletico Madrid. Had he not been selected for Brazil, yeah, it wouldn't have been as much of a hoo-ha. Because he had played games for Brazil, Brazilians don't like him. A lot of Spaniards aren't overly keen on him playing for Spain. Is he a good player? Absolutely. If he was able to play for England, would you have him? Yes. There was a point at one point where Manuel Almunia was being considered for England because we had a goalkeeping crisis, because he had never played for Spain at any age group. And he'd lived in England so long by playing for Arsenal and then late on his career at Watford, that at the time, England were considering getting Almunia to play a couple of games for England. And he qualified under residency because he'd lived here for so long, I think since 2005, 2004. He'd been signed by Arsenal. That just tells you something, that he'd not declared an allegiance for Spain. It's the Aymeric Laporte could play for Spain or France because he's got Basque heritage. Because if you are to play for Athletic Bilbao, you have to have Basque heritage. Put that out there. He's a Basque Frenchman, all right? And I've got criticised about the Laporte situation before. He's decided he's flip-flopped on whether to play for France and for Spain and for France and for Spain, and there is some political things behind that. And now he's playing for either. Jose Altidore could play for Haiti. Jose Altidore is technically also qualified to play for Haiti, but now he's played so many games for the USA, he's now a USA player. If he played 3 caps or less, I think the rule's 4. Maybe wrong, I think it's 3. I think the limit might be 3 or 4. Had he played less than 4 games for the US, he could play for Haiti. He has chosen to play for the US. But Jose Altidore is also qualifies for Haiti. If he was to debut today, the Haitian national side and the US national side could choose Jose Altidore. That's another player who switched allegiance. But he was the son of Haitian refugees living in Florida, hence why he ended up playing football and developing his skills with the US. But Jose Altidore, he could technically play for Haiti. You look at the Jamaican national side, look at the side that played for Trinidad and Tobago in 2006. Birchall only played for Trinidad and Tobago because he was born in Tobago while his parents were on holiday. And he was registered there on his birth certificate. And because that was the country of his birth, Trinidad and Tobago and their FA went to him and said, "Do you want to play for us in our national side?" And he said yes. He was playing for Port Vale at the time, played at a World Cup in 2006. Aaron Birchall. A little bit there. He only qualified for Trinidad and Tobago because he was born there. His parents were on holiday in Tobago at the time he was born. Technically, if we want to get really, really into it, my birth certificate says West Germany. And if West Germany was still a country, because my birth certificate, even though I don't hold a German passport, because I was born there and registered there, I could play for what was West Germany, in theory. And a lot of the US players could play, oh, well, so you see Revel Morrison going off at the JFF because they didn't book him on for business class on his flight to play for them in South Africa. I did not say anything about Revel Morrison, but I don't keep up to date as much with football as I used to. I mean, we've gone a bit off topic from what I started the live stream with, but Revel Morrison is a player who's really not fulfilled his potential. Revel Morrison is a player who hasn't fulfilled his potential that he showed as a young player coming through, bursting on the scene, and he's bounced around various clubs and hasn't really settled, and his career is really derailed. The But this happens with a lot of young players in a lot of sports. They show a lot of potential. They burst onto the scene and it sort of doesn't go the way you want. The USA thing, I mean, yeah, I mean, I in theory, yes, I could play for Germany in a variety of sports if I so wished. It's a very tenuous link, and I haven't lived in Germany since 1992 officially. But you know, I was born there. Do I speak enough German to play? No, no. I wouldn't be able to communicate with a load of my teammates. So it's the USA. This is how they. This is a problem that USA has is they're not developing enough good talent, and a lot of their talent is born overseas. When it comes to the non-North American traditional sports, um, I've got nothing against the players saying, "Look, I was born here." This is if they decide right, this is the country I'm sticking with throughout their entire youth system appearances, or if they ever play at youth level, at international level, if they say I'm choosing this country to play for, they should play for that country throughout their entire English career. That's my personal opinion. I don't think a player should flip flop, their nationality depending on the situation. I think the Declan Rice and Diego Costa situations have highlighted that. Now the German FA are trying to nick this young English player because he's played for them at youth level at one point or at senior level. I think once you declare for a country at international level, that's the country you should play for. And we can debate the Kevin Peterson situation and Owen Morgan in cricket till sun rises. It's a thing. We've had it in rugby league, we've had it in rugby union, rugby league especially, where players do flip flop their nationality at international level, or the teams they play for, and you could look at something like Williams and say, he's played for New Zealand at Test level, now he's playing for Samoa. You could not make this up. On the side of the Declan Rice thing, he's played youth for one country, decides to declare for another. Actually, when a player declares, it's generally, if they haven't appeared at youth level, then it does come down to residency if they are an overseas player. Hence why Almunia was considered as an England goalkeeper at one point. Obviously, he never appeared for England, but there was a point where there was concern at the goal position for eligible goalkeepers. I forget who the manager was at the time, but there was an injury crisis at the time, and Almunia had lived here long enough. He'd never played for Spain at youth level, and he hadn't declared, availability, although he had always been available for Spain. He'd never been on the Spanish radar for Del Bosque at the time, and they decided to hint at him coming over should there be, availability. I think it was for the 2014 World Cup. There was a concern that I think Joe Hart got injured, and Ben Foster was still sort of in and out of the team, and they were trying to get Almunia called up to the national squad. Do I need to have a Discord? I actually have got a Discord, but I don't use it. Would I love to have a Discord? I try and keep things simple, really. If I'm honest, when it comes to the YouTube, I link both my YouTubes into my Twitter account. I share on the Facebook as well. I try and keep things simple. I think because I work 5 to 6 days a week full time. I don't really have the time unless this channel started really making money and it was self sufficient, and then I didn't have to work full time. Then I would consider Discord, but because I've got a full time job and I have to wake up early in the morning, and by the time I get in, by the time I get in, I've been awake for 10 to 12, sometimes 14 hours, sometimes 16 hours, and so I'm not on YouTube as much as I was before, because of the hours. The new job I've got, the hours have changed. I live further away from work than I did before. It varies. Today I had a nice early finish. I left my depot at 2:30. Tomorrow I've got a real crap day. I might not leave my depot till 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So I do have variable finish times. I mean, I'm contracted 6:30 to 3:30, but I could work until 8. Generally, I could work until late. The company I'm now working for is different to the company I was working for before. It's a brand new company, different setup, same job, just different company. And where I was before, the hours were pretty similar. Very few late finishes, occasionally breakdowns and mess like that. To have a Discord, this channel would have to be self sufficient and actually making enough money where I didn't have to work a full time job, where I could pay all my bills, pay my rent, have food in the fridge, and keep a. It would have to be at the point where I was completely self sufficient and had some money to play with. At this point, not even monetized, so I'm not even considering having a Discord and a Patreon until this channel, as it is self sufficient. To have a Patreon, I've got to actually have different tiers of Patreon, and then I've got I think pay some money to have Podbean. I've got to have a make money off that again. I've got to pay some money in to get money out, and at the moment, money's tight. Discord, yeah, it's a great way to communicate, but at the same time, I don't really use it. I've got a Discord account, but I don't use it. I think I just stuck that as a name. I mean, would I want to change the channel name? I don't really want to, if I'm honest. I think all right. The Mason Greenwood situation. Obviously, what happened in Iceland uh, is a problem, and I think there is clearly something going on. The player's clearly distracted, and he's at risk of his career not working out. I think again, when it comes to young players in a variety of sports, a lot of them get a lot of money very, very young, and are thrust into the limelight. And a lot of them haven't been outside their sport since they were at youth level. We're talking about age 11. A lot of these young football players, for example, are in academies. If you go to the US side of things, by the age of 16, you're already being offered scholarships to university to play in the university collegiate NCAA system. So a lot of these young kids have been in a sort of bubble and don't go out into the outside world. Sport is their life. I think with the Mason Greenwood thing, I think, yeah, the Iceland situation a couple of weeks ago till now, there's clearly things going on. He's clearly a young player who's not been guided in the right direction off the field. He's clearly very talented. There's no debating that. He's clearly very, very talented. And, he's got the ability. It's whether he can keep focused. I think there has been some rumours about his off-field indiscretions or off-field distractions plaguing him, and we could end up with another Paul Gascoigne on our hands, or another Ravel Morrison who doesn't quite fulfil his potential, another Jermaine Pennant, an unfulfilled potential. I mean, Gascoigne fulfilled his potential. Let's not forget that. Great player, but his off-field issues have dogged him throughout his life, and now he's post-football. He's a mess. I think that's the. I think what they used to do with young players was they used to, when a young player signed for a club and got his first full-time contract, they generally put young players with senior players. They used to billet them. This happens in a lot of sports even now, that young players, when they first sign up, are put with a senior player in their family and billeted and made sure that they have that senior player there. And you see a lot in the NHL, young players, when they first sign their first pro contract after being drafted, they get billeted with a senior player for a season or two until they can sort themselves out, get used to training regime, full season, and they get billeted with a family. The same thing happens when a player gets traded or transferred and they need to set up in a new location. They get put with a more senior player and their family. At the lower leagues, a lot of players end up living together as housemates. It's less common now than what it used to be. You listen to some of the ex-players when they're giving interviews about, when they first got into the sport, when they first turned professional, and how they shared a house with like 4 or 5 of their teammates. It's less common now. I think they need to possibly do that more. With they billet some of these players for some of the senior squad members. I think clearly off-field distractions, especially when you're young. During the first lockdown, he rented a flat, which he wasn't allowed to apparently because of the rules, and he was in. There's nothing that I moved. A week before the first lockdown, I moved during the summer, so I've moved 3 times technically in a year, and so I can say yes, you could still move. You would just advise not to at the time, but I think if he's living by himself and he's not been given guidance by a senior player, and I think that's where the club have failed. But then when you've got senior players in football, like Kyle Walker, there's an example. Kyle Walker. Kyle Walker, for example, a senior player, misbehaved during lockdown. So he's in his 30s now, Kyle Walker, or late 20s. Not the type of person you want to be billeted with. Like Airbnb or something. If it was an Airbnb, that was against the lockdown rules. I believe that's where you're getting at. And yes, Greenwood was one of those players who misbehaved during lockdown and got in trouble. But look, Kyle Walker breached lockdown, got in trouble. Moses Keane got in trouble. Jack Grealish had his little car accident, got in trouble. This is the problem. A lot of these players are young, got a lot of money, and are misbehaving, and it does cause problems when it comes to these players misbehaving, not taking the right direction, possibly wasting their careers. I don't know. I do think though that he is at risk of him wasting his career. But he's not the only young player who's really showing great talent, burst onto the scene, showing really great development. He's on the cusp of becoming like a superstar, and then his career gets derailed. We've seen it with a lot of players. It's not just a Greenwood problem. Ravel Morrison is another one. There's been quite a few over the years. Rossi, he was obviously American, Italian. Look at his career now; it's just faded. He was a great young talent coming along. The problem is the guidance of these players and making sure they're given the right guidance and the right direction. Because at some point their careers are going to end. What are they going to do post football? And this is the thing. If Southgate and Ollie are being a bit too soft with these players, not being saying you've got to behave, because you look at what happened in Iceland. You look at what happened in Iceland, and it wasn't a good look. Considering that if I was to do that, or let's say you were to do that, if you were on a secure bubble, getting a fine, lose your job. You miss. Let's say you're with work. Okay? Look, Bellingham, but they're probably billeting him with a senior teammate. Same as Sancho when you went over there. They're probably they seem to be looking after them better. They seem to be developing their skills better. They seem to be doing better. There's a reason for that. They're being looked after in the right way. They're being guided and advised in the right way. You have to look at who these players are being advised by, who the direction their off-field life is taking. Because so many players, they maybe upbringing is a thing, but then you could look at Marcus Rashford. He's done pretty good for himself. Marcus Rashford, what he's done since March has been very commendable. I think we should commend Marcus Rashford on his non-footballing activities. He's raised awareness of an issue that is there. He has been tireless in his fundraising efforts. for those affected by the preschool meals scandal. He's done a lot of work for charity. When the lockdown was at hardest and the players weren't able to train and play, he devoted himself to something that was positive. So it is doable for a young player to be in the limelight, burst on the scene over the last couple of years, but still have a level head. It is doable. Now, they both play for the same club. So why is Greenwood going off the rails and why is Rashford doing so well? Is it to do with parenting or is it to do with you know, the people you have around yourself advising you, like the agent, the company you keep? Because Rashford's done he's very well spoken young man. He's done very, very well with his non-footballing activities, his charity work. He's a few years older, but he's still a young player. He's still developing his skills. He hasn't peaked yet as a football player. He still has got more to give. He's doing pretty good for himself. Other players like Makeda, for example, when he burst on the scene for Man United, look where he's playing now. His career is nosedived because, again, a lot of money thrown at a player very, very young. He's getting paid a lot of money a week, easily distracted. And we see this a lot in a lot of sports, that money becomes a distraction. The lifestyle becomes a distraction. So they have to, I think, Man United do need to take some responsibility in looking after him, but technically he is an adult. But we'll have to see what happens with Greenwood, and you look at the Iceland situation with Foden, and yeah, that wasn't a good look, but it shows how weak Southgate is when it comes to player discipline and courtesy, because they wouldn't do that if they had respect for the manager. Rashford debuted at quite a similar age. Greenwood's a few years younger. So 5 years younger or 3 years younger, something like that. Greenwood's a good player. There's no doubt on that. Greenwood is possibly a better player than Rashford, quite possibly. But it's the off-field distractions that I think could derail his career. There's no debate on his skill. There's no debate on his ability, and he's rapidly developing as a player. It's the off-field stuff that I think could be a problem, and may become an issue, which could distract from what he does on the field. And then if his performances on the field start dropping off, then there's a bigger problem. We've seen it with Berahino, West Brom. His career's disappeared, gone down the toilet. We've seen it with a whole host of players who've shown great promise, and it's not materialised long term. And a lot of it is to do with off-field distractions. And Jack Grealish was going down the same path. I think Dean Smith is trying to handle him very, very well, and giving him responsibility, making him a club captain and a key integral part of the team, signing him to a long-term contract. He's performing on the pitch. But then you look at Danny Cipriani with England Rugby Union. Yes, he made it to the top level. He played Test rugby, for England. His off-field behaviour, including a lot of alcohol-related incidents, basically ended his international career. Quade Cooper for Australia, another player whose international career has been dogged by off-field indiscretions and distractions. It's not just a football thing. Well, is Greenwood a better player than Rashford at the same age? Quite possibly. I may be in agreement there. But at the same time, it's the off-field stuff which could derail his career. He might end up leaving Man United. They might go, we've had enough of you misbehaving. We can't deal with this. We're moving you on. And any prospective club further down the line will go, right, last chance saloon. And several players have had that. I think the Man United England debate, whether his behaviour and his misbehaviour in Iceland, I don't think helps. I think, England were responsible. Southgate clearly is not a stern taskmaster of a manager, a disciplinarian, but it does show a lack of respect for the team you are playing for, be it international or club level, if you're misbehaving whilst in a team camp. It does raise questions about discipline and respect for the coach. It does raise questions, and whether Ole Solskjaer is a more laid-back approach, or a bit more strict, considering he played for Ferguson, so he's learned his craft from Ferguson. Alex Ferguson didn't tolerate players misbehaving. Player off the field was getting up to no good. He was very quickly out the door. That's something you notice with Fergie. There's a lot of players who didn't last very long at Man United who were very, very talented. Were out the door. The Pochettino thing, okay, he's been linked with Barcelona job, he's been linked with the Real Madrid job, he's been linked with Man United job. There's a reason why he got sacked from Tottenham. The team massively underperformed and didn't achieve their potential. Pochettino, I think there's a reason why he got sacked last season. And Manchester United have not had any real stable management since Ferguson. They've gone through a lot of managers in the last few years, and a high managerial turnover doesn't necessarily lead to success. Chelsea notwithstanding, when it comes to Premier League football, if you keep sacking your manager, Chelsea somehow managed to get success regularly with managers. I think the only manager since Abramovich took over who won nothing was Avram Grant. And even then, he had a pretty good season when you look where the team finished and how they played. Problem is, high manager turnover generally doesn't lead to success. It's the rule. The exception is Chelsea and a few other clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona who do quite often go through managers and still win trophies. Generally speaking, if a club keeps changing manager, they generally aren't very successful. And since Ferguson's left, apart from Van Gaal, who had a very long period in time, if you look at the length of how many seasons he was there, I think it was 3 seasons. And Mourinho gave it a crack, I think 2.5. They've not really had a long-term manager and a long-term plan, it seems. And I think that's a problem. There's no long-term plan. They could have a down season, but bounce back next season. There's you're not going to win every trophy every season. That's a given, okay? That is a given. But if you're regularly changing your manager, expecting success and expecting a turnaround straight away, it doesn't necessarily happen. If you give a manager time, okay, I think then you have a stability is key in in winning silverware long term and consistently winning silverware. You can win a one-off trophy with a manager. Ranieri proved that at Leicester. He wasn't there very long. He was there a season and a half and won the Premier League and then was fired. So sometimes, yeah, a short-term shot in the gut, you can win a trophy. Leicester City. Long-term consistent success, generally look at Ferguson, look at Wenger, Shankly, Busby. Mourinho, I think you could say his first spell at Chelsea was his longest spell at a club ever. Generally speaking, long-term managers generally get consistent success. Now, okay, Pep Guardiola winning back-to-back trophies at Man City. Could Klopp and Liverpool do that? It's possible. But look at those two. They've now been at their clubs for several seasons. Look how much silverware they've won between them. How do I see a salary cap working in the Premier League? It's doable. If League One and League Two are discussing it, which are lower leagues in the football pyramid, it is doable. But then it requires UEFA to come on board. In order to have, I've discussed this in a previous video, in order to get a salary cap system in place, European football as a whole, as a continent, needs to adopt a salary cap and a transfer cap system. Because financial fair play, which is the system we currently have in place, clearly doesn't work. UEFA and under Alexander Serafin have admitted it doesn't work. The guy who came up with financial fair play, who is an Englishman, by the way, admits it doesn't work. It is possible. It would have to be more of a soft cap than a hard cap because you've got promotion relegation. But if you put in a salary cap in the Premier League, you would have to have a salary cap in the Championship, League One and League Two, and it'd be a staggered cap. We'd have to stagger the salary cap. And then if a team got relegated from the Premier League to the Championship and then vice versa, Championship to League One and then to League Two, you're going to have to offload players. I think that's an interesting question. But in order to have a salary cap in English football, you would have to have a salary cap across European football. It depends on your contract. If you've got a relegation clause, whereby if your team gets relegated, you put it's an automatic transfer request. We do see that when players don't stick with a team when a team goes down. This is what did for Portsmouth. When Portsmouth got relegated and went through the leagues, Tal Ben Haim was still on Premier League money in League Two. It was in his contract. He did not have a relegation clause where he would automatically take a pay cut based on performance. He signed a contract at I think 80 grand a week. I think a 4-year contract. And Portsmouth honoured it. Portsmouth honoured his contract until his contract expired. They were paying him 80 grand a week in League Two. Hence why Portsmouth were in so much financial difficulty. Yes, £70 million went missing, but it compounded their difficulties. No, they don't. If you've signed a contract and it doesn't have a performance-based promotion relegation in there, and your contract is, I want to get paid 50 grand a week for 4 years, you sign a 4-year deal. Unless they sell you on, unless they transfer to another club, the club has to pay you that money. They have to pay you that money. It works differently in the NFL and the NHL with trades, because then the new team either pays let's say you get traded. Let's say Jack Eichel, NHL player, is playing for Buffalo right now. One of the top, I think he's on 10 million per year, right? One of the best paid players in the NHL. Let's say you say, I've had enough of Buffalo, I want out. I want to get traded out of this team. Let's say team with cap space right now. Got to think of a team with salary cap space. Let's say he gets traded, he waives his no movement clause to teams, and let's say a team with salary cap space picks him up. Let's go Florida. There's on the East Coast, so it's time time. Say the Florida Panthers pick him up. Buffalo can say, well, we'll pay a percentage of the salary. That can happen. But his contract could be for 5 years. He's traded. His new team have to honour the rest of that contract before he's offered an extension. Over here, it's different. It's not a franchise. It's a club system. The situation is, you sign your contract, you've got a very good agent. And this is where player agents need to be a bit more transparent in the whole contracts and player agents and regulation of them. If you've got a good agent, you can argue a good deal. And you go contract extension, we'll sign you for 4 more years. This is what happened to Hamburg, for example. Hamburg Bundesliga side got relegated at the end of last season, I believe. Season before last, 2019, got relegated out of the Bundesliga. There were a lot of players there on big money. A lot of them stayed. Now, whether they had to take a salary cut, that's a different thing. The only way, Mino Raiola, this is the thing. Transparency in Raiola don't rhyme, that is true. He's one of these agents that keeps popping up with regular occurrence when it comes to some of these big transfers and some dodgy dealings, and how much money he's made out of transfers. So that is a name that regularly pops up. It's like Isaac Moses in rugby league in the NRL. It's another high-profile agent who's fallen afoul of the NRL when it comes to how he agitates player moves. And I think a salary cap system could work. It could work. It would have to be a staggered system for the leagues. But then if you're putting a salary cap system in place, I think you'd also have to put a transfer cap, like a spending cap in place. Now that's sort of like financial fair play, but sort of isn't. Because financial fair play covers everything: club income and expenditure, and staying within a certain loss-making margin, a certain percentage of loss. It's a flawed system. It's an absolutely flawed system, the financial fair play. They've admitted as such. It doesn't work. Clubs get punished. They appeal. Their punishment gets reduced or overturned. Yes, but it does make it an even playing field. What we're seeing right now is a clear imbalance in football. And going back to the Greg Clark resignation, the reason why he was giving evidence towards the select committee on a whole host of issues, and why Rick Parry has said 10 clubs cannot pay their players, is spending's out of control. Football spending is out of control. And if 10 clubs, 10, that's 9% or 9.2% or something like that of the Football League. That's Premier League all the way down to League Two. That's 9% of clubs in the Football League cannot pay their players this month. That is a concern. There's no way of denying it. 9 to 10 clubs, possibly more, cannot pay their players this month or their non-playing staff. It is a concern. There's a valid reason why League One and League Two are arguing for a salary cap and have been for months now. The issue is we are in a promotion relegation system. The only other league that I can think of that has a salary cap in the UK is the Super League. And even then, it's a flawed system because of promotion relegation. And when, let's say, the Broncos came up, experts were saying they're not going to win a game. I think they won 12 games in that season they were up a couple of years ago before Toronto got promoted. Toronto fell apart. They're racked with debt and they are not playing next season. The distribution of money, I know, I still think a salary cap and a transfer cap are required. It still means clubs can make a lot of money, but it also means those smaller clubs have the ability to win and the ability to then get that extra revenue of appearing in the Champions League and the Europa League and that extra revenue coming and make themselves wealthier. At the same time, controlling the clear expenditure and the uncontrollable glut of spending that has basically destroyed so many clubs financially, not just in the Premier League, but in the lower leagues, because they're overspending to get to an objective. What that would also entail is more homegrown talent, because you are restricted on how many overseas players you can buy or how many players you can buy in the transfer market and how much you can pay the top talent. It is forcing clubs to develop and promote youth talent through the system, through their club system, into the first team. So you should see a higher percentage of homegrown talent playing in English football, because English football averages anywhere between 30 and 40% on a match day weekend in the top four leagues. You look at Germany, you look at Italy, you look at Spain, look at France, it's around 50 to 70% on any average match day weekend, around a match day weekend. So I think, yes, a salary cap is possibly required and it could possibly work, but it does require UEFA being on board and having discussions with UEFA at governance level. But the FA doesn't even have a chairman anymore. So that in itself, poses the question, is there the willingness for all the leagues? Because if League One and League Two come in with a salary cap and are pushing for it, that's going to put pressure on the Championship, because a club getting relegated from Championship to League One is going to have to comply with the salary cap, which means they're going to have to cut expenditure, which means players are going to have to be sold, which then floods the transfer market with players at Championship and possibly Premier League level that shouldn't be on the transfer market. You know what I mean? Or they're going to have to take a pay cut. And will players be willing to take a pay cut, considering PFA has come out and said players should not take pay cuts or wage deferrals that are against their contracts? There has to be a change. I mean, other sports have, even with promotion relegation, have quite successfully brought in salary caps and spending caps in order for the sport to be self-sufficient and sustainable. Just because a handful of clubs have a lot of money doesn't mean all clubs do. If 10 clubs out of 92 cannot afford to pay their players at the end of this month on payday, that is a concern. The fact that the government's saying no assistance to elite football, no. The fact that the Premier League is trying to cut a deal with 2 leagues rather than 3 is not negotiating in good faith. The pay-per-view shambles has shown how greedy a handful of clubs are, and only for the benefit of some, not for all of the game. a salary cap doesn't necessarily mean the richer clubs are going to get any poorer. It just means some of the less well-off clubs, some of the smaller budgeted clubs, can actually A, make more money, and B, control their expenditure where they're on a level playing field with the wealthier clubs. Yes, you could say the Boston Celtics in the NBA before the salary cap were unbeatable because they could just throw money at players and players would join the super team. I have read about Boston Celtics and their success. I mean, the NBA, okay, a handful of teams regularly keep winning. Major League Baseball is the only North American sport not to have a salary cap of any kind. And that nearly led to there to be no season this year. Now, Major League Baseball managed to have a World Series, the Dodgers win, yay, we're all happy. But there was a debate about how to get play back in. The salary cap issue came up. Major League Baseball has a way of shooting itself in the foot with player unrest. Bang. NHL is having issues with its salary cap. It's going to stay flat for 2 more years. And that's meant about 20 teams are in cap hell. Over 2/3 of the league have no cap space. And players may have to take lesser contracts than they would have got last year. I do think, yeah, but their salary caps are generally based on the draft system, and they do work pretty well. We don't hear many stories of salary cap breaches, although teams probably get around it because there's loopholes like long-term injury reserve (LTIR), which is regularly used, and buyouts regularly used. In Australia, there's a difference. The AFL has a list system. The NRL doesn't have a draft system, and there was a legal challenge to the NRL salary cap system, which went to court, and yeah, there were some legal challenges there. Before then, no salary cap in place. The same teams kept winning. Teams kept going bust. You bring a salary cap in, less teams have financial difficulty than they did before, although money is still tight in the NRL. There was concerns that teams could go bust if the league didn't resume. And the AFL has expanded since their salary cap system has been in place. So salary caps do work. They do work. And it's very rare that a team gets caught out breaching. And when they do, the punishments are quite severe. And we've seen it with Saracens in England. We've seen it Wigan in England, Wigan Warriors in the Roman Super League. They got fined for a salary cap breach. We've seen it with Melbourne Storm, Canterbury Bulldogs, Parramatta Eels, the Warriors of New Zealand. We've seen it with Manly Seals, Cronulla Sharks. All those teams got fined and punished. We've seen it with Carlton in the AFL. A salary cap is doable. Yes, you could say, baseball, Moneyball, needs to bring in a salary cap because it is an unsustainable system. It is. There is definitely a haves and have-nots, and the same can be said for European football. The lack of a salary cap system is what's causing problems in the sport. And it's not just English football; it's across the board. Barcelona, they're in huge financial turmoil. They are in a mess. Their wage bill is unsustainable because European football, and this is where UEFA has to. I did a video. I do suggest you check it out. My ideas for reforming football, and a salary cap is one of the things I came up with, and a transfer cap or a spending cap. It is a way to control spending. Motorsport is starting to go down a spending budget cap across various Formula and various motorsport series. I'm not sure if NASCAR has one or not. There are clearly the haves and have-nots in NASCAR. The rules basically say the cars are pretty equal. However, is that the case? There are some guys, at the back regularly. On the side of what's happening at Barcelona, that is a team that's massively overspent. But when times were good, they could get away with it because of the global brand that Barcelona is. However, when fans can't fill the Nou Camp, and you can't sell merchandise, you've still got to honour these players' contracts. They're in trouble, and the losses mounted very, very quickly. But that's across the board in European football. It's not just a Barcelona problem. Look at England. If 10 clubs cannot meet their wage requirements, it tells you that the situation is serious. And even before COVID, the fact that Bury went out of business and Bolton and Wigan were on the verge of collapse and Macclesfield's now been wound up and Southend's next on the chopping block. Yeah, there is, clearly problems with the system that's in place. If financial fair play doesn't work and has been proven to be a flawed system, which UEFA have admitted, what's the point of having a rule in place that doesn't work? And then you have to ask the question, okay, if financial fair play doesn't work and professional teams are calling for a salary cap, admittedly at the lower level for now, the system isn't sustainable. If one of the biggest clubs in Barcelona is in that much mess, and if Man United now, forget what they're doing on the field, Man United as a global brand is one of the most successful global brands of the last 30 years. If they're losing £5 million a day without fans turning up to games, it tells you that the financial systems that football has in place are broken. Because bearing in mind, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a report, an investigative journalist figured out that with what the Premier League was telling us, and the Championship and all that, what the clubs were telling us was basically that they could let us in for free or for less than £10. Okay, that was what they were being told publicly by the clubs. We can let you in for free, but we choose not to. Being clear on that. What has actually transpired 4 years later is they can't afford to let us in for free because guess what? They're losing money. The sport is built upon debt. There's a lot of debt in football. It's highly profitable, yes. A lot of debt. A lot of these clubs that make a lot of money are actually servicing debt. They're not actually profitable yet in the sense of having no debt. Man United is an example of a club racked with debt. Marquee player signing would help in football. I mean, look, because fans can't be in stadiums and you lose that match day merchandise sales and the match day ticket sales, it's a problem. And yes, football is a business, but here's the thing: if a business cannot afford to pay its staff, regardless of the situation, that is worrying. Whereas a year ago, they could. And yes, salaries will have to go down in the long term. There is no way that the system, even when fans do come back, is sustainable because of the amount of debt that has been incurred. That debt has to be paid off. There are still transfer payments for Neymar's transfer 3 years ago that PSG are paying to Barcelona. Oh yeah, when a transfer takes place, there's normally installments of payments. It's like a mortgage on your house. You pay off in installments. It's like a bank loan. You pay off in installments. Fans not going to games has caused a money problem, a money flow problem. These clubs are still honour bound by the contracts they have signed in the transfer negotiations to, pay transfer fee in instalments. What is also interesting is Phil Jones, for example, when he was playing for Blackburn, he got bought by Manchester United. There's an add-on clause to that transfer. Every trophy he wins as a player, we get money. So if Man United keep winning trophies, I don't know how long that clause lasts, but we get money. If there's also sell-on clauses. So if a player, I think it was Harry Maguire, I believe, goes from Hull to Leicester, Leicester to Man United, Hull are making money out of the transfer to Man United indirectly. They get a proportion of the fee that is paid. So Man United are paying Leicester, and Leicester have to pay a bit of money from the money they make to Hull. It's mad. So how does that work? He's been transferred from Hull to Leicester, Leicester to Man United, yet Man United are paying instalments to Leicester, and Leicester are paying instalments in such, or a one-off payment to Hull. It's mad. But he doesn't play for Hull anymore. He hasn't played for Hull for years. He was transferred from Hull to Leicester ages ago, but they're still paying them money. Leicester are still paying whole money, and Man United are still paying Leicester money for a player who hasn't played for Hull for 4 seasons, 3 seasons, 5 seasons. It is a head scratcher. This guy hasn't played for this club under contract for years, yet the club he was playing for previously, or after playing for Hull, are still paying them money. This is the problem with transfer payments. So a player might get transferred, let's say, £20 million. Well, I don't know. Mo Salah played for Roma at one point, right? Now playing for Liverpool. He might get sold on by Liverpool to Real Madrid. Let's go for that. Okay. Liverpool will still pay money to Roma. Real Madrid will still be paying money to Liverpool. He may then leave Real Madrid after a season, go on to, I don't know, Borussia Dortmund. Yet money's still being paid to Roma by Liverpool in instalments. This is how crazy the transfer system is. It's not just one-off payments. Some transfers are one-off payments with add-ons and clauses, right? So hypothetically, a player could be 4 or 5 clubs down the line, yet that first club is still being paid money from the second club, who's being paid money by the third club, by the fourth club, by the fifth club. It's just a money train. You know, I think I think I know we've got a question about the Greg Clark sacking. Yeah, look, as I said earlier in the live stream, as I said in the video on the topic, which I did a couple of hours ago, 3 years ago, the FA were before the same select committee and were told basically you need to reform. We need to reform. The report that committee published said the FA was out of touch, needed structural reform, was not dealing well with racism, sexism, homophobia, and bullying allegations, was not dealing well with historical abuse allegations, and on top of that, the report said it was an old boys' club where the jobs for the boys, basically. And then this is even more damning. The structure of the FA was thus mostly white, middle class, and male in their administrative and governance roles. White, middle class, and male. What's Greg Clark? White, middle class, and male. What's he just gone and done? Basically, all the things that were structurally wrong with the FA, he's mentioned in a couple of sentences. It doesn't look good. When 3 years ago, almost to the day, the same select committee said the FA was not fit for purpose and needed reform. 3 years later, the crows have come home to roost. It had no change has really occurred that is positive I can see within the FA. It hasn't clearly, we are where we are 3 years ago. The Parliamentary Select Committee of Culture, Media and Sport, Digital Media, Culture and Sport, where they keep changing it, but basically said, you're not fit for purpose, you've got to reform. 3 years later, the guy in charge of the FA at the time has now resigned because of comments he made in front of that same select committee, where whether it was a poor choice of words, or it generally is him being an idiot or having those views, it's just I don't know. But West Ham had this thing where a chief scout said we don't sign African players because they're a pain. We just don't. We avoid signing African players if we can because they're a pain in the arse and they're terrible trainers and terrible players. They say we do not try and avoid signing this player from this background. That came out with West Ham a couple of seasons ago when David Moyes, was in charge after Slaven Village. Didn't look good. So yeah, you could argue that the situation in place is the FA hasn't reformed. Still got the same issues that it had 3 years ago. And yeah, the report stated it was an old boys club, jobs for the mates, jobs for the boys, predominantly white, middle class and male, and most of them haven't really played football apart from at school. So the lack of ex-professionals governing the game and giving advice on how to improve the game, the lack of ex-referees within the structures as well, so ex-match officials, again was highlighted. That there's a lack of ex-players in administrative roles and a lack of ex-referees and linesmen also who decide to give up, running the touchline, refereeing the game, again involved with recruitment of referees or giving advice to the FA, again was highlighted. There was a lack of ex-professionals, within the governance of the game. So that also was highlighted 3 years ago in the select committee report, and it's up there for public, discourse. It's up there for public reading. It's an openly published document that you, as members of the public, can read. And recommendations were listed. Have they been implemented? I don't really see much progress. I think, there was a lot of. Southgate. Okay, I think the shine's worn off. I think, the team is clearly underperforming. That's my personal opinion. There are some really great young talented players on display, who were eligible to play for England, and at the same time, there's some senior players that are being overlooked that could be very, very useful to this England side. And I think Southgate, I think he's a bit of a yes man. I do think his tactics are flawed and his strategy is flawed. But at the same time, would we get, should Stuart Pearce have got the job after Sam Allardyce was sacked? Now, you can debate Stuart Pearce as a club manager level, but I think he's had more managerial experience than Southgate and has also worked with some of these young players who've come through to the senior level, laying the foundation, I think, for this England. Should Stuart Pearce got the job? I think you'll get more respect from the players for the manager, and you would have like Foden and Greenwood getting up to their shenanigans in Iceland, for example. You might still have Vardy and Cahill as part of the international setup. Vardy especially. I don't think Kyle Walker would be anywhere near this England side. I don't think Pickford would be in goal. Let's just put that out there. I think Pearce would choose by form and not by favouritism. But I don't know. I think on the side of writing to club officials and not getting responses and bearing in mind, Man United has a large Asian fan base, a lot of Sikhs and Hindus in the Great Manchester area, massive Man United fans. They're very popular in India. There's clearly a large Asian fan base of football. I am surprised by the lack of Asian players. And when I say Asian, I mean South Asian, like Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan origin. I am surprised by the lack thereof. Obviously, Oriental Asians, there's quite a few. There's quite a few Koreans and Japanese who play professional football. But again, is it a cultural thing? You look at the subcontinent and their two most popular sports are field hockey and cricket. But there isn't a lot of players of subcontinental Asian descent. But he's still playing. I mean, you still got a player of Indian descent playing. Whether he's any reasonable talent is another thing. But you have to ask the question why there's not more subcontinental Asians playing the game. The Oriental Asians love football, and there's more of them playing the game. So there's another debating point, and this is where the clubs and the governing body, in this case the FA, need to really figure out why. The best way to ask is at grassroots level. Go into the local communities and go, right, you're a fan of football, why are you not playing it more? Find out why. Because change happens from the bottom, not from the top. But he's still got Asian origin in him. Because he's of mixed race, should be no consequence. He's of a mixed race background, and a lot of players of mixed race background. But I do think if you look at diversity within the game and growing the game, everything happens at grassroots up. So you have to look at grassroots for change to come from the bottom, not from the top. Of course, from top down, creates division and creates resistance. This change needs to come from the bottom, and the clubs and the FA need to work out why there are more South Asians playing the game. There's clearly a fan base there. I see, every Indian person of Indian or Pakistani origin or Bangladeshi origin that I know is a football fan. So the question is then, they're fans of the game, why are they not playing the game? So, and if they are playing the game, be it having a kick about on a Sunday or playing at non-league level, the question is then why are they not reaching the higher professional levels? Doesn't matter if it's League One, League Two, Championship. Chowdhury at Leicester, okay, there is a exception to the rule. And yeah, if they've got no role models to look up to, that is part of the problem. But yeah, I do agree with that. I think that is part of the problem. But at the same time, I think the clubs need to do their research, and the FA needs to actually look at grassroots level and ask the question: okay, there's clearly Asian kids who are fans of the game. There's clearly Asian they're playing at school because schools have teams. They're playing, having a kick out in the park with their mates, and you have to ask the question: okay, where's that next step? Why is it not happening? And if it is happening, why is it happening in so few numbers? There's lots of mixed race kids playing the game. There's lots of Afro-Caribbeans playing the game. And yes, only a tiny percentage do actually make it at full professional level. But then you look at the non-league and the lower leagues. And the same question applies. Why is it then that a lot of Asian kids are fans of the game and do play the game at school and have a Sunday kickabout, while they're not taking the next step and going into academies, while they're not taking the next step and playing in the non-league and Sunday leagues and actually getting noticed and then playing in the non-league? Why is that next step not happening? Why are they not getting trials at clubs? That's the question. And we've debated this before. Change comes from the bottom, not from the top. Forced diversity doesn't work. It creates resistance. You need to have natural development of diversity and a natural grassroots development. And in that case, you have to start from the bottom up and ask the question, why are they not taking that next step? Pro-discrimination laws actually don't necessarily have the desired impact. You see it in South Africa. Pro-discrimination and the Rooney Rule is a tick box exercise. It's just to keep the left wing happy. It does nothing actually to promote actual diversity. Trust me. The Rooney Rule is a lot of Afro-Caribbeans and African Americans are not big fans of the Rooney Rule because they do see it as a tick box exercise. Just saying, we've interviewed X amount of ethnic minorities. I don't think forcing against the Rooney Rule. It's the positive discrimination. Yeah, there needs to be you need to look at grassroots and why those kids aren't taking that next step. Forcing a rule, I think, is more damaging than a natural progression. And a lot of people that I know from mixed race and ethnic minority backgrounds do say that the Rooney Rule, or that kind of tick box exercise, does nothing for diversity. If anything, it hardens people's stance against it. And if clubs truly represent their communities, they would do more community outreaches with. If they truly, I think this is where football's lost touch with the communities that the clubs represent. But there has to be a reason why. I mean, I played football with loads of Asian kids when I was at school. Every one of the Indian and Pakistani and Bangladeshi kids that I played with at school, who were in my year group or my team kind of bracket, or they would play for the teams that I played for. They weren't necessarily the best, but my God, they did try, and my God, they did enjoy playing. So it makes me ask the question, why they're not taking the next step. If the amount of Asian kids I played with had a great joy for the game, be it rugby, football, cricket especially, but rugby and football, they love playing it. It didn't matter how good or bad they were, they loved playing it. So clearly there's an enjoyment there, and there is a fan base there, not just in football, but in a variety of sports. And it does make me scratch my head, why there aren't more Asians playing professional rugby league, professional rugby union, professional football. Considering where the teams are based and the diverse backgrounds of the communities that the teams play in, it does make me scratch my head and think there's clearly something wrong here. And it's not a lack of accessibility to the sports, because there's, these sports are played in schools. There's clearly a next step that's missing. And it's not because of a lack of talent of some of these kids. It isn't. The talent's there. I play with some very, very skillful. How many white, black players? Like, white, black, that makes no sense. There are plenty of mixed race cricketers, not just in England, but in South Africa, in Australia and New Zealand. So that's a very flawed argument. It's a very, very flawed argument. Look at the South African side, for example. How many of those players are mixed race? Look at the Australian side. How many of those players are Aboriginal white mixed race? And the same in New Zealand, Maori white mixed race. Quite a few, I think you'll find. Reason the numbers are low. These are the state school and public school, private school sports, cricket, both codes of rugby and football. These are the sports that are played at school by the state sector and the private sector. They are, exposed to it from the age of 7. So in that case, if they're playing and enjoying playing and are showing an aptitude for playing, why are they not getting scouted? Why are they not, taking the next step and playing on their Sunday league team or signing up for their community club in the non-league or the amateur leagues, and then taking that next step? Why is it not happening then? Because if you're saying that they're their fans, great, then there's clearly an interest. Why they're not taking... Oh, look, cricket is played in state schools. I don't know what planet you live on. I've had many a mate play cricket. Most of my mates who play cricket at the local cricket club all went to state school. So that's a complete load of horse, if ever I've seen it. It is played in state schools, I can assure you of that. And there are local cricket clubs as well that have youth setups. If the kids aren't playing at school, there are still plenty of kids playing cricket. Not as much as there should be, admittedly. And it is not just a rich white man sport, I can assure you that. Same with rugby union. It's not just a rich white. It's a media perception, I think, is there. But I can assure you now that when I was playing rugby at my local rugby club, there was a fair few scrappy state school kids who had gone up, played for the local rugby club. And I tell you, when I say scrappy state school kids, these kids were pretty working class. We think they would be playing rugby league. They weren't. They were union, and they enjoyed it. I think let's not talk about the origin of the sport. The media perception of the sport now is flawed. The historical origin of the sport maybe, but that perception is not reality. And I can assure you of that, having played at my local rugby club, I can tell you now that the amount of lads that I played with from the local council estate outnumbered the number of lads that I played with who were rich kids. I can tell you that for a fact. A lot of the lads came from local council estate that I played with, and they were some hard bastards, I can tell you that. But cricket was still played at your school, and you still played it, and you went to a state school, I bet. So it is part of the curriculum. It depends on the schools that adopt each particular sport when it comes to when they play them. Some, schools play hockey, field hockey, rather than football, and that's their chosen sport. It's the sports programs of the schools. The fact that you need to have affiliate schools with league and union, all that, the perception in the media is cricket and rugby union are the tough sports, rugby league and football are the working class sports, and that's not the case. It's played across the board, both public and private schools. So I think the fact you're trying to force clubs to pick crap players is a problem. The thing is, there's clearly a gap between them playing at school and playing with their mates and possibly signing up for a Sunday league team and taking that step into the professional ranks. And that is a concern that there is a gap there. And there's clearly there is clearly a recruitment gap, not a talent gap, because the amount of kids when I was at school 15, 20 years ago, they enjoyed playing it, and they all took part willingly. They weren't like, oh, I want to play today. They all got stuck in playing rugby and football, and they were some of them were really, really good. When I say really good, I mean we're talking some of the best in the year group. So the ability is there, the willingness is there. It's now, okay, where's that gap? Why is that gap there? Why do they give it up? Because a lot of these kids stop playing when they leave school or university, these lads and girls. They just go, I'm not interested in playing post the age of 24. Yes, clubs do have elite players like Ronaldo or Messi because Ronaldo and Messi play for football clubs. So your question is flawed. Uh, it's all about the youth academies at all clubs because I'll tell you now, the class of 92, Man United before 1992 weren't a very good team. They just happened to have a great youth system that all came through at the same time. And not all clubs are going to have elite players. Ronaldo and Messi are generational talents. Let me assure you that. 10 years' time, Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Man United may be doing really crap because they're not finding that elite talent anymore. Generational talents come along once in a generation for a reason. And now you're saying most players are shit. Wes Brown is still a better player than you'll ever be. David May won Premier Leagues, and I tell you now, he was a pretty solid defensive midfielder defender. I remember David May, and he was a pretty solid piece of brick shithouse. I've watched David May play many times. He was a solid player. Not the most skillful. He was a defensive player. That's his job, was to kick lumps out of people. That's what he was employed to do by Ferguson. He won a lot of trophies. Wes Brown won a lot of trophies. And yeah, Wes Brown is not the best player. No hiding that fact. Pretty average. He was a solid defensive player. Mistake. He was like Titus Bramble. Not great, but he's still a lot better than you'll ever be. So let's just to call him shit is disingenuous. Okay, to call Wes Brown and David May shit is disingenuous. They were part of championship winning teams. Were they the best players on the team? No. Were they squad players? Yes. Are there better players than them? Absolutely. Really, if you believe that a Sunday League player is better than Wes Brown or David May, I think you are talking out of your arse. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, Wes Brown, was he an elite level player? No. But did he play in a very elite league? Yes. So to say Wes Brown was shit, by Premier League standards, he wasn't a great player. There's no denying that. There are better defenders than Wes Brown. The fact he stayed in professional football for the best part of 20 years tells you he's pretty good. He's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. I think Wes Brown would do me on a skills competition, partly because I'm a goalkeeper, but that's another thing. I think David May would do me as well for positional sense and skill. Yeah, they weren't great players. They weren't bad players. They were pretty average, but they were still playing the Premier League. And the fact that Wes Brown played the best part of 20 years as a professional tells you something. Okay, so you're saying he's not a top player? No, he's not a world class defender. There's no hiding that. He's still a pretty decent defender. If you're telling me there's a Sunday League player better than Wes Brown playing centre back, you are clearly smoking a lot of shisha. You're smoking something that isn't a cigarette. I can tell you that because yeah, you played for United, big deal. United at the time were the top club, so to even play for United, you had to be a decent player. Honestly, so you're telling me Wes Brown is shit? This is the problem with football fans. You like to slag off players when in reality you couldn't even run at the same pace as them, or even play Sunday League. Wes Brown would bloody score 30 goals for Christ's sake. This is ridiculous. Even a League Two player would smash Sunday League. A League Two team in a pre-season would put 20 past the Sunday League side. There's a reason why it's called Sunday League, and it's a bunch of mates from the pub play. There is a complete difference between elite football and training week in, week out and playing at the Premier League level and playing Sunday League. Wes Brown now, yeah, he's retired. Okay. Oh my God. Great, you're from the Asian community. I get that. You're trying to bang the Asian drum. I get that. To tell me that Wes Brown and David May were shit, right? when they won a fuckload of trophies is ridiculous. Were they average players? Yeah. Are they still better than I ever will be? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that they're better than me. Christ, I haven't played football since I was 16. I'm not going to pretend that I'm any good at it. I was just a goalkeeper. I wasn't very good in the outfield position. I was good at stopping the ball with my face. I was a goalkeeper at school. But to tell me that Wes Brown and David May were shit in comparison to the players that are playing against them in the Premier League, yeah, they weren't that good. In comparison to 99.9% of players who don't make it, yeah, they're pretty good. They played in a very elite group. It's called the Premier League for a reason. It's called elite level competition for a reason. So you're telling me that there's some Asian kid playing some Sunday League football somewhere, right, for a pub team who's better than Wes Brown. Okay, there's a reason why he's not at a bloody academy. There's a reason why he's not playing professionally, and it's not because the clubs are racist. Let's stop that BS right now, right? It's because he's not good enough. He's not focused enough. He's not fit enough. There's a reason why he's not playing professional football. So you're telling me that a multiple Premier League winning player is shit when he's clearly not? Get a grip of yourself. Banging the drum and saying force diversity is a way forward and forcing X amount of minority players into a squad is bullshit. It does nothing for diversity. If anything, it hinders it. Right? Because you're signing up players that clearly are not capable of playing at that level. Wes Brown was capable of playing at Premier League level. Was he a world-class defender? No. I think you find Cannavaro was a world-class defender. Wes Brown, still pretty decent. Okay? There's a reason why, there are other reasons why Asians don't want to play the game post-school age. Because they have other interests. They don't really. Asians playing cricket? Absolutely. Wes Brown was crap. Yes. Was he shit? No. Was he crap by Premier League standards? He was pretty average. Was he a shit player? No. There's a reason why he got into Fergie's side in the first place. You don't play for Man United if you're wank. And while Man United aren't playing very well now, there's a whole host of reasons for that, but those players are still Premier League players. So you banging the drum about diversity by saying you've got to have forced diversity, you've got to have X amount of Asians in the team, X amount of blacks, X amount of whites, X amount of Orientals, X amount of South Americans, mixed race, is bullshit. It's a tick box exercise. It does nothing for diversity. If anything, it hinders it. And the amount of people from minority backgrounds say, I don't like the Rooney Rule, it will do nothing to help grow the game in minority communities, are correct. It creates further resistance from various groups, predominantly right-wing racists, but then the left-wing are also equally racist as well, because anti-Semitism is a thing. And then you create more hatred than there was hatred before, and create more hurdles, because then players who clearly aren't good enough have to play because of the Rooney Rule, and then it actually harms the product you get on the field. Diversity starts at the bottom by looking at grassroots and why these kids are giving up the game in the first place, and why they're not playing to a higher elite standard. That's where you figure it out. Forcing clubs to go, you must have X amount of Asian players, you must have X amount of Afro-Caribbeans or African players, you must have X amount of white players, does sod all for diversity and creates more division than was there before. Now, I have played at school level and at, amateur rugby level with players from multiple backgrounds. Rugby union is not just a tough sport. I would play with plenty of working class lads from the local council estate, as I said. I'll tell you now, they were some of the better players on the team. There is a reason why they are giving up the game. And it's not for lack of fucking opportunity. Don't give me that bullshit. Apparently, the problem with Asians not playing football is not a lack of a joy for the game, it's a lack of diversity, apparently. Then in that case, why are so many Asians fans of the game? Clearly, they're fans of the game for a reason. Clearly, their kids are playing it for a reason. There's got to be a reason why these kids decide, I just give up, not interested anymore. Partly because they enjoy cricket more, maybe a starting point. Partly because they go to university, or they go into the workplace and don't have time to keep playing their Sunday league because they have to work. Because only, I think, 3% players that go to academies at any point from the age of 11 to the age of 16, 17, when they can sign their full-time contract, actually make it. From all backgrounds, white, black, pink, purple, alien, it doesn't matter. So stop giving me that crap that there's an opportunity, because they get to play at school. They have the opportunity to be scouted. when they're playing at school. Put that out there. Or for independent youth clubs. Oh, yes, they exist. Youth leagues exist. Right? And secondly, you have to ask the question why they go, I want to give this game up. Why they don't want to carry it on. It's not because they're not good enough. So stop with that forced diversity bullcrap. Plain up. Simple. Pisses me off. The grassroots is there. There is played in schools. Just have to ask the question, why does this particular social economic group want to give it up? Why does this particular background of ethnicity want to give it up? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. And you're from that community, so you should be asking your own fucking community why Asians aren't playing fucking football professionally. You shouldn't demand the FA go, you must have X amount of players on your team from this background. Bullshit. Does nothing. It actually hardens resistance to growing the game in new areas and new communities. Fucks me off. The Rooney Rule fucks me off. Because the majority of players playing in the NFL, actually the majority are black. There's a reason why there's no black coaches. There's a reason. Not because of lack of opportunity, because most of the playing group are black. Because they're not good enough. Simple. And since they've had the Rooney Rule, the amount of coaches who get jobs who are crap and do nothing for their team has skyrocketed. And then it means the same successful teams keep fucking winning because they don't sack their coaches. Fucking bullshit. Fucking bullshit. We've got women linesmen and women referees in the men's game. Not for lack of opportunity, is it? You know why they're there? Because they're good enough. They weren't good enough, they wouldn't get the fucking job. Fucking hell. Jesus. Simple. If you force diversity on something, it don't work. If you allow it to grow naturally from grassroots, it works. You have to ask the question why they give up the sport. And actually go out and actually do questionnaires. Why have you given up football? You were very, very good at it. Why have you given up? Are you actually focused on a career where you can actually make it? Because only 3% of players who play at academies actually make it professionally. Fucking hell. It's a legitimate question. They play at school, so they're given the opportunity to play the game. They clearly love the game because they're fans of it. They buy all the merchandise. You see it at Man United games all the time. There's a huge Asian following of Man United, both domestically and abroad. And in that case, if there's not enough Asians playing the game, why are the Koreans and the Japanese and the Chinese really taking up and actually playing it more professionally? Do you know why? Because in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, cricket and field hockey are the major sports, and they dominate the professional sporting landscape. That's why. It's a cultural thing. The kids choose to play other sports because it's ingrained in their culture from their families. So forcing diversity and saying, oh, there's not enough Asian players. They're not interested in playing, for fuck's sake. You can't force kids who are not interested in a sport to play it. They won't play as well because they will resist playing it. They'll play crap for a reason. There were some kids at school, from a white background, may I add, who didn't like playing football and rugby, and they were forced to play because it was one of the compulsory sports, and they were shit at it for a reason. They weren't interested. Thus, why not say forced diversity? If a kid's not interested in something, they won't enjoy it. Simple. That's why I don't enjoy basketball, because I wasn't interested in it. I had no joy of it. I didn't play very well at it because I wasn't interested. I hated swimming. Wasn't very good at it. Didn't mind athletics, but I wasn't the best. But I actually enjoyed athletics, ironically enough, especially javelin and discus, because I could lob things at people. Or at least image people who were bullying me as the target. Did it for me. God, forcing diversity on a kid. Christ, telling to a kid, you've got to play this. They end up resenting you for it. The amount of kids who were forced to do compulsory sport who didn't actually enjoy it, deliberately played badly to show that they were hating said sport. When that compulsory sport was no longer compulsory from like the age of 16, they dropped it. Fucking hell. Winds me up when people go, you've got to have the kids play. Let the kids choose what sport they want to play. Then you get the kids enjoying it, then they put more effort into it. If you force them to play something, they're not going to fucking enjoy it. It's plain and pissing simple. Fucking hell. There's a reason why Asian kids play field hockey and cricket really well. It's because they enjoy it. It's not forced upon them. It's a cultural thing, however, but they seem to enjoy it because it's where their parents or grandparents come from. It's the national sports. God, there were so many kids at school who hated certain sports, who deliberately played badly because they hated what they were doing. They had no interests. Fucking hell. If a kid doesn't like something, they'll put little effort in. If a kid enjoys something, they'll throw themselves at it, even if they're not very good. It's plain and simple. I hated writing. I'm not very good at writing essays. I hate writing. I'm not very good at it. I don't enjoy it. I do it because I have to, not because I want to. It's the same with drinking. I don't drink anymore because I don't enjoy it. It's plain and simple. If you don't enjoy something, you're going to put less effort in. If you enjoy what you do, you put more effort in. Simple. These kids are given opportunity at school. They choose to enjoy cricket more because it's a cultural thing. Then you have to ask the question, okay, if these kids are enjoying following the sport, why are they not enjoying playing the sport? You actually have to ask the kids what they like. And then you have to ask the community what they like. And if there's enough interest in playing the sport and enjoying playing with your mates, you might actually get a player base. Forced diversity does nothing. It's a tick box exercise, and you actually get a weaker product as a result, and a weaker. It doesn't matter if it's sport or industry, you get a weaker industry as a result because you've got people there just because of the colour of their skin or their gender or their sexuality. Tick box exercise does nothing. If anything, it weakens what you're trying to do. It works against what you're trying to resolve. But then we have cricket and field hockey in this country, and we play at a very high standard at school. And there's some very, very good players of Asian background who represent England at both sports, or Great Britain at both sports. It's there. No forced diversity there, is it? They chose to play that sport. Oh, fag ash, fucking fag, piss me right off. I don't like ranting like that. I don't. I hate the forced diversity. I prefer natural diversity to happen because the kids or the adults choose to play. The issue is when the barriers are put in place for them to adapt their skills and express their skills when they're deliberately not selected and not chosen to play because of the colour of their skin. That's the problem. It's not the lack of opportunity at school level because all the kids are allowed to play football. All the kids are allowed to play cricket. All the kids are allowed to play hockey. Ugh. Fucking hell. I get questions about why, as a Brit, I like ice hockey. Right? I get questions about why I like cricket. I like sport. It interests me. I'll watch any sport, at least once. Right? Yeah. Yes, my dad played non-league football for a bit and then played sport in the army. So he was obviously sports mad. My granddad played field hockey for England. My other granddad played a bit of non-league football as well for a while before his professional career in politics and the oil industry. So yeah, I had some sporty relatives. All three of them are now deceased, by the way, so it shows that sport is not necessarily good for your health. But I will say this. Yes, my dad and both my granddads were very sport orientated. No denying that. Some of the sports they like, I don't like. Some of the sports I like, they didn't like. But yes, I was introduced to sport, and then I chose which sports I liked. Hence why I've got my likes, my favourite sports list on this channel a couple of years ago. Some of those sports I chose myself. My dad wasn't a massive fan of motorsport. I am. But because I was introduced to sport and the sports networks on TV at a very young age, I discovered what sports I like and don't like. And I'll give every sport a chance. And yes, I've given basketball a chance. I tried playing it. I didn't enjoy playing it. I don't necessarily enjoy watching it, but I will watch the occasional game with mates. If they're interested in it, I will watch it. I just don't enjoy watching it as much as other sports. I'm a casual fan. I'm not a massive fan. I'm a casual fan. Baseball. I can't get into it. It's too slow paced game. I just can't. That's my personal opinion. But there is a reason why every Asian I have met and come across is a fan of football. Some of them, apart from cricket, are fans of other sports as well. My friend Manny, he's a Scottish Pakistani. He likes boxing. He likes MMA. He shouldn't, if you're talking about stereotypes, but he does. My friend Mo, he runs his own martial arts gym. He's of Somalian descent. So the lack of diversity argument is bollocks. In governance, yes, there is a clear lack of diversity. At governance level, yes. At playing level, at amateur level, no. That is ridiculous. At top end professional level, okay, there could be some more, but there's a reason why the South Asian community go for cricket and field hockey. Is it a cultural thing? Yes. Do they enjoy those sports more? Yes. Do they feel a cultural attachment to those sports more? Yes. It's a thing. However, the interest in playing is growing at a professional level across the globe. Let's not deny that. There are Asian players of South Asian origin playing. It's bollocks. But yes, you could argue at governance level of sport, yes, there's not enough people from diverse backgrounds. Yes. Grassroots level, that is a load of horse, but I'd buy it. I've seen it with my own eyes. But there's a reason why that next step is not being taken. And then you have to look at the sports that these social economic groups enjoy most, and they are cricket and hockey. It's not hard. It really frustrates me when you're battling ignorance and demands for something that will actually create more division and less integration in the long term. Promote on talent. If a club scout goes, that kid's got some great skill but not longevity in fitness and positioning, there's a reason for that. Colour of skin is irrelevant. A talent scout in any sport. I've seen ice hockey players who are Asian. Yes, I have actually come across Asian descended ice hockey players. We're talking Indians, by the way. Cricket, obviously. Field hockey, obviously. Rugby, yeah, I've come across a few. So the fact, doesn't matter if you're talking elite level, Man United, your Chelsea's, Liverpool's, your Man City's, to your non-league or your Sunday league team, the opportunity is there. The club scouts the ones watching these kids going at the age of 11 when they're playing their youth league on a Sunday or a Saturday, or going to the state schools and scouting because they've heard of reports of a couple of players. They go out there. And you go, oh, this kid actually looks quite good. Why is he not in our academy? Let's get him in. They do actually go out and look at Sunday, Saturday, and Sunday kids leagues. They do. There are scouts at these games. There is a reason why they're not there. Because they're not good enough. Let's stop this forced diversity bullcrap. They're given the same opportunities, and most of these kids enjoy playing cricket and field hockey more, partly because there's a cultural reason, partly because they're better at it. I can't say that anymore. It's a thing, but it's also the media they consume. Will there be more kids of Asian origin playing football and rugby union rugby league? Yeah, absolutely. It's a thing. It happens. It happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight. But there is a reason why they're not taking that next step. Professional scouts are out there looking at these kids when they're about 10, 11 years old to get them in academies. And only out of that, 3% of those kids make it as a fully fledged professional football player in the top 4 leagues. Plain and simple. God. The amount of them are throwing scrappy at a young age is astounding. Astounding. This is where the salary cap system could work, but that's another question for another day. But I'm going to leave that there for now because I'm now pissed off with just ignorance. Just does my nut. Demanding something that actually creates more problems and more division than diversity. Just, it's like talking to a brick wall. I can't stand talking to a brick wall because that's how you go mad. Heritage to me means I'm colourblind in the sense of what I see in front of me. I'm not actually colourblind, but I'm colourblind in the sense of if you're talented enough, you get there. If you're not talented enough, you don't make it. Simple. It's how professional sport works. Simple. It's an anything, but I'm going to leave the stream there. Thank you for watching. Thank you for asking all the questions. And I'll have some more videos for you. Very soon.